I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to remind everyone that wishes to address the board this evening that you need to sign up with our clerk. There is a 5-minute limit. This is Miss Cindy Hutchings right here. She sits at the end of the board table, so you can fill out a form, and if your agenda item is on, if there is an item on the agenda that is pertinent to your subject, then you will be given 5 minutes to speak to that. Before I consider a motion to adopt the agenda, Dr. Gist, are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
Yes, Madam President. On consent item E8, if the board could please correct the further recommendation, and the language would be to authorize the campus chief of police. And that would be to execute on behalf of the district the agreement to access criminal justice information through the Oklahoma law enforcement telecommunications system, and that's based at the need that the folks that we're working with on it have. And then in addition, I want to withdraw items E6 and E7, and both of these will come back to you at the next board meeting. That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Gist. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I'll call for the vote. Ms. Fate?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The agenda is approved. Thank you again to everyone who's here this evening. Many of us saw each other earlier today downtown at a rally in support of our teachers and calling on our legislators to get a raise done before April 1st. And it was an awesome day. I hope the mayor will tweet out his video, which he took of everybody showing their love and support for the teachers and making some noise for our teachers. It was super encouraging to see everyone there, and I want to thank everyone for being there today. And I know everybody that was back at work was with us in spirit. So I don't have anything else, Dr. Gist, unless you do, regarding our visitors. Just lots of people, everybody that's here is special. And we'll go to your presentations then.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. We do have one presentation this evening. We have Zane Ricketts from Eisenhower International School performing My Shot from the musical Hamilton, and we have Principal Connie Warner is here representing all of the team at Eisenhower. Zane is a 5th grade student from the Eisenhower International School, as I said. He recently won the speech arts contest for his school with this performance, his performance of My Shot, and he is a tenacious, hardworking student. He also was recently an excellent ambassador for Eisenhower and for all of Tulsa Public Schools when he participated with some of his peers in an 8-week exchange program near Madrid, Spain. And I also want to just acknowledge that Zane's teacher, Mrs. Starr, would have loved to have been here, but she felt like it was important to honor her work the contract, and since that would have been being here with one of her students would have kind of fallen into that category. She's watching remotely, but we sure appreciate Mrs. Starr and everything that she does as well. So we are looking forward to hearing from Zane, and would you join me in welcoming him and getting ready for his performance?
Hello. Like she said, my name is Zane Ricketts, and today I will be performing my speech arts performance, which is My Shot from the Broadway musical Hamilton. I'll begin. Oh, wait. My Shot is about 5 American Revolutionary War soldiers in the Revolutionary War, and they're prepping themselves for war. I'll begin. I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Yo, I'm just not my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I'm gonna get a scholarship to King's College. Probably shouldn't brag, but dag, I'm amazed and astonished. The problem is I got a lot of brains, but no polish. Gotta holler just to be heard with every word I drop. Knowledge, I'm diamond in the rough. Shine a piece of coal, trying to reach my goal. My power speech unimpeachable. Only 19, but my mind is older. These New York City streets get colder. I shoulder every burden, every disadvantage I've learned to manage. I don't have a gun to brandish or walk to shoot to famish. The plan is to fan this spark into a flame. But it's getting dark, so let me spell out my name. I'm the ALEXANDER. We are meant to be a colony that runs independently. Meanwhile, Britain keeps on us endlessly, essentially. They tax us relentlessly. When King George sent around was ascendants free, he ain't ever gonna set his ascendants free. So there will be a revolution in the century. And to me, he says in parentheses, don't be shocked when the history book mentions me. I will lay down my life if it sets us free. Eventually, you'll see my ascendancy. And I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. I'm just not my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. It's time to take a shot. I dream of life without the monarchy. The unrest in France lead to anarchy, anarchy. Heise has all anarchy. When I fight, I make the other side anarchy with my shot. I'm a tailor's apprentice, and I got child knuckleheads and local apprentice. I'm joining the rebellion, cause I know it's my chance to socially advance. Instead of sewing some pants, going to take a shot. And you know we'll never be truly free until those in bondage have the same rights as you and me. You and I, do or die. Wait till I stallion on a stallion with the 1st Black Battalion. Have another shot. Geniuses, lower your voices. You keep out of trouble and you double your choices. I'm with you, but the situation is fraught. You've got to be carefully taught. If you talk, you're gonna get shot. Bird, check what we got. Mrs. Lafayette, hard rock like Lancelot. Think your pants are hot. No, I like you a lot. I touch a plot blacker than the kettle corn in the pot. What are the odds of gods who put us on one spot? Papa squad of conventional wisdom, lacked it not. A bunch of revolutionary manumission abolitionists. Give me your position, show me where the ammunition is. Oh, am I talking too loud? Sometimes I get overexcited. Shoot off the mouth. I never had a group of friends before. I'll promise that I'll make y'all proud. Let's get this guy in front of a crowd. And I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. I'm just not my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I imagine decimal diffuse me like a memory. When's it gonna get me? Am I sleep 7 feet ahead of me? If I see it coming, do I run or do I let it be? Is it like a beat without a melody? See, I never thought I'd live past 20. Where I come from, some get half as many. Ask anybody why we're living fast and we laugh each for a flask. We have to make this moment last. That's plenty. Scratch that. This is not a moment. It's the movement where all the hungry spread something to prove when foes oppose us. We take an honest stand. We roll like Moses, claiming our promised land. And if we win our independence, is that a guarantee of freedom for our descendants? Will the blood be shed, begin an endless cycle of vengeance and death with no defendants? I know the accident in the streets excite, but Jesus, which we know the bleeding and fight. I've been reading and writing. We need to handle our financial situation. Are we in nation states? What's the state of our nation? I'm past patiently waiting. I'm passionately smashing every expectation, every accident, act of creation. I'm laughing in the face of casualties of sorrow. For the first time, I'm thinking past tomorrow, and I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. I'm just not my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow. Very impressive. We enjoyed that tremendously, Zane. Thank you so, so much. We really appreciate it. And that concludes our presentations, Madam President.
I should say so. I don't think anybody would want to follow that. Thank you for being here, Zane. That was awesome. We're going to move to our consent agenda. As a reminder, our consent agenda are things that were on our information agenda last meeting, and we discussed them and vetted them, and now we come to, sort of may look like an omnibus to you, but we have had full consideration of these at our last meeting. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
I'll call for the vote if there's no discussion. Ms. Fate?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That brings us to our action agenda. Oh, I knew you guys were whispering about something down there. We missed approval of the minutes, which I actually think we did last meeting as well. We need to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of March 5th, 2018, and also the special meeting on February 2nd, February 23rd, 2018. Is there a motion to approve the regular meeting and special meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
I'll call for the vote. Ms. Shelton?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now we're going to move on to the action agenda.
Madam
We have-
President, if I may, before we consider the action agenda, I would love to make a motion to postpone voting on F2 until April 2nd so that we could treat it as an information item for tonight. I think we'll hear a lot of input on both sides and would like to ask the board to consider postponing the actual vote on that item until the next board meeting.
She has a second?
I'll second.
You can take the agenda items up in whatever order you wish.
I think then we'll move that motion until after we hear the conversation this evening, so we'll move on for now, tabling that motion. We're going to go to F7, approve the rescinding of the name of the vacant lot currently named Henry Ford. Is there-
Approval.
Second.
I'll call for the vote unless there's any discussion regarding the renaming of the lot. Ms. Shelton?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're going to move to item F6 now, which is approve the rescinding of the school name Robert E. Lee Elementary effective July 1, 2018.
Move approval.
Second.
Before I entertain the motion, I want to clarify the recommendation and process for rescinding school names. On the last information agenda, we reviewed the recommendation to rename 4 of our elementary schools. We decided to consider the rescission recommendations at the same time that we consider the renaming recommendations. As ad hoc committees meet and recommendations are presented, we will consider the remaining rescission of school names at the same time we consider renaming schools. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that just because Lee is the only thing on the agenda tonight, that doesn't mean we aren't going to still have the discussions around the other schools, Jackson, Columbus, and Shoto, that have been recommended. So I think we have several speakers on item F6. And I am going to begin with Brianna Dodson. Oh, excuse me. Oh, okay, sorry. Here we go. Okay. So we're going to do F6 first. Ms. Shelton. No, I'm sorry. Dr. Decker. Who's on first?
I am.
Dr. Decker.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on this action item F6, saying that I enthusiastically and proudly support this recommendation. The name Robert E. Lee Elementary fundamentally conflicts with the values of Tulsa Public Schools, and it should be therefore rescinded. And the same is true of the other names recommended to be rescinded. Our schools play an extremely important role in forming a student's identity. A school's name can send hidden and not so hidden messages to our children about how they relate to one another, how they should treat one another, and whether they should respect one another. More specifically, a school's namesake may send messages about supremacy and dominance over others or lack thereof. Our school district wants all students and all in our community to know they're valued. We recognize our painful history, and Black Lives Matter. Ideally, all of our schools' namesakes would be people who all of our children can admire and aspire to be. Ideally, all of our schools' namesakes would be people who believed all have the potential to learn, and it's a moral right to receive a quality education. Ideally, our schools' namesakes represent figures that champion progress for all people, particularly progress in education. Rescinding the school names does not erase our past. Instead, it helps us acknowledge our past as it truly occurred and acknowledge the impact of our history on people then and still now. We are taking on the responsibility to help our community evolve so our current power structures don't just continue to replicate themselves. Thank you.
Ms. Shelton. Oh, okay.
Excellent.
No, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion on the table to approve F6. A call for the vote. Ms. Shelton.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye. We'll move on to F2 now, and I'll read that recommendation. Rename the current Robert E. Lee Elementary School, Lee School, effective July 1, 2018. And further recommend that any artifacts or any other references that specifically honor Robert E. Lee be removed. This does not preclude discussion of Robert E. Lee as a person of historical interest in better understanding and contextualizing U.S. history. In accordance with Policy 8102, an ad hoc committee met on March 12, 2018 to consider renaming Robert E. Lee Elementary School and voted in favor of renaming the school Lee School. The ad hoc committee explored principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion as a result of the proposed school name rescission and resulting name change recommendation. The ad hoc committee recognizes that this is a challenging, sometimes divisive, uncomfortable, but nonetheless vital component of continuing to foster a community aligned with the values of the school and its guiding principles, and Tulsa Public Schools' values and guiding principles, and its Destination Excellence strategic plan. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve item F2.
Move approval.
Second.
And now I'll call on our speakers. So we'll start with Ms. Brianna Dodson.
Hello. I am the parent of 2 current students at Lee Elementary and hopefully 2 future students as well. As such, I have been interested to see how the school board would proceed with the name change process as it progressed. From the beginning, the public has been told that this would be something addressed with much care, with respect to the community's involvement, and with time to make sure the choice was not made hastily. Like most parents, I stay informed of the things going on at the school and participate when I can. I have gone on field trips, been to class parties, and even helped with an after-school band coordinated by another parent. But in the last year, of all the communication that has come home, there has only ever been one official mention of a discussion of the name change at Lee. One single PTA meeting, which I believe was held during the day when I had a previous commitment I couldn't reschedule. So I waited for the school board meeting on March 5th to see what would be decided. I watched the live stream, listened to the presentations, and based on the previous communication from Dr. Gist, I was under the assumption, as I believe most Tulsans were, that the name change process would progress after a determination was made about whether or not the names would in fact be changed. Since that meeting, there has been zero communication from the school. Regarding the name change, no official notification that an ad hoc committee met, had been chosen, that a name had been considered, voted on, or selected, or that this vote would be taking place today. Not one email, not from the school. I understand that our board member has said he's made a substantial effort to keep the community members at our school informed and has been responsive to those who have reached out. I have not received responses to the emails I sent earlier this week. I find that some of the most amazing things that my children and I love about Lee are the collaborative learning environment, the interest-led learning, and focus on community. This year, one of the pre-Ks and second grade classes worked together to do a sock drive for the homeless. When my oldest was in kindergarten, their class was interested in filmmaking, so they interviewed someone involved in production in Los Angeles and put on their own production in class. And when my younger son had a problem at recess and was sitting by himself, a student from a different class came over, sat with him, and asked him to play. These are the lessons my kids have learned at Lee, things they don't always learn through curriculum, but through amazing teaching and a sense of community. I know that many feel that the name Lee is what makes this school amazing and sets us apart because of the history and the past. However, I think what truly sets us apart has nothing to do with the name, but with the amazing things that happen within our walls and the grounds. The way our students learn, the methods our teachers use, the community we encourage, and the questions we encourage our students to ask are all things that set us apart from many of the other schools in Tulsa. Outdoor learning, using nature in the classroom, hands-on activities, centers, collaboration, letting students study what interests them, and not shying away from difficult conversations. These are the things that make our school amazing. But are these the things that are reflected in the way that this process has unfolded? My kids did not feel like they had a voice in this decision. I'm sure I'm not the only parent that felt like they were blindsided by a conclusion being made without discussion. I think few people would say that our school doesn't struggle with PTA seeming exclusive, but is that the lesson that we want to share with our kids in this case? Do we want them to feel like a small group of people gets to make a decision for them all? Or do we decide that a greater lesson of community, inclusion, and collaboration is important? All I am asking tonight is that we postpone this decision so that other parents and students have the chance to voice their opinions, suggestions, and feelings about the name change. The school should have time to organize and publicize meetings for these voices to be heard. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Henry Dodson.
Hi, my name is Henry Dodson. I think we shouldn't change the name. I think I should.
Just read what you got.
I think we should change the name. I think kids should be involved in this conversation. I'd like a person that starts with L to be the name of our school. I don't like when people call it Lee School because that's what people call it now.
And why do you want it to be an L?
Because Robert E. Lee was named. What was that it?
He wanted it to pick. He wanted it to pick a name that starts with L so they can still be the leopards. He still wants to be a leopard.
Oh, that was it. I forgot.
You can still say this. Do you want to talk about Grandparents' Day?
You talking?
No, that's you.
Our next speaker will be Miss Valerie Osgood Sutton.
Good evening. My name is Valerie Osgood Sutton, and I am a Tulsa native and a proud product of Tulsa Public Schools, counting Lee, Carver, and Booker T. Washington among my alma maters. I came to public education late, though, transferring as a fourth grader because of a major decision by my parents. Change is never easy, especially as a 9-year-old. However, I'm thankful for my parents' decision, and I'm equally thankful to these 3 fine schools for helping to launch me on my path. I have had the unique honor of being the PTA president at Lee Elementary this year. This year has been an epic journey, and one that has and will continue to mold me as a person. However, even with my service to the school this year, I'm a parent first, and motherhood is in itself the most unique and challenging journey of them all. I found my way back to Lee when my husband and I were looking for a kindergarten that would be a positive fit for our son. I was nervous until I toured Lee, and I left that tour with a new feeling of peace deep in my heart. I had seen welcoming and engaging classrooms that thrived on child-led inquiry, and learning wasn't only confined to a desk. And when your son has consistently been described as busy, these are important things to look for. Lee met all our goals for our busy son. It was clearly a rich and diverse educational experience, and Lee was and still continues to be exactly what he's needed. He's given the latitude to grow and flex academically and socially. He's challenged, he's encouraged to find joy in his learning, and most importantly, he's afforded the opportunities to learn from his mistakes. Recently, my son quite proudly informed me that they had a conversation in their social studies class about historical injustices. And if you are familiar with 10-year-old boys, sometimes you have to drop everything and be ready to listen when they are ready to talk. So I did, and here's the story that unfolded. His teacher had teed up this conversation by saying that it was going to be difficult and that it was in fact hard for adults to have these conversations in a manner that was respectful of differing opinions. But she was confident in their ability to do just that. He then proceeded to share his thoughts on current immigration policies and other items he and his peers had discussed. I heard and saw in my son a sense of pride and maturity that was new. He felt valued, he felt like his ideas were important, and he was maybe a little smug that he and his classmates had had this lengthy, heavy debate emphasizing that, "Mama, sometimes adults can't even do this." This conversation was timely for me. Leading a community of parents this year has been difficult. I've heard, understand, and empathize with all sides of the debate. And while I may want to find a solution that makes everyone happy, I've also known from the start how impossible that is. I truly believe the current recommendation is a good compromise, because I don't want to lose sight of what happens after we resolve the name issue. Because while the school community can't all agree on a name, we can all agree that the work and the conversations currently happening in our building regarding equity, diversity, and inclusion are critically important and must continue in a meaningful way with authentic engagement from our children. By keeping only the Lee and Lee School, it allows us to honor the history of the building as a public institution that has welcomed families and educated children for almost 100 years. In a state where public education sometimes is treated like the problem by legislature and not the solution, the history of this great public school should be celebrated. And changing the name doesn't change history. By keeping Lee, it serves as a reminder of our past, lessons learned, and what more we can achieve. But we must commit to each other to continue this discussion for years to come, to use the name Lee as a teachable moment year after year, just as we use the classrooms and spacing of the spaces of the building. We have a duty to teach our children in an age-appropriate way all of the history of our country, the good, the bad, the ugly. We have a duty to teach history from multiple perspectives, so all students can understand why a certain race, ethnic, or gender group might not consider certain historical figures as heroes. If my son doesn't understand the missteps, injustices, and the shameful actions of people in American and world history, he runs the risk of not recognizing them for what they are when he encounters them in the future. And I want my son to recognize hate, intolerance, and racism for what it is. He will encounter it in his life, and I want him to be brave enough to stand up against it. This is what I want for my son and all the students of Lee School. I'm so thankful for a school community willing to embrace, facilitate, and empower these nuanced conversations, and I look forward to engaging and participating in this important work. My hope is that as a community, we can move forward and model civil discourse for our children in a respectful way and truly learn from our shared similarities and differences. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Greg Robinson.
Tomorrow will mark 55 years and 1 month since a young minister penned a letter to his fellow clergy from a cold, hard seat behind the rusted bars of a Birmingham jail cell. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. quipped to his audience, "I must make 2 honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the past few years, I've been gravely disappointed with the moderate. I've almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride towards freedom is not the Ku Klux Klanner, but the moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, 'I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods,' who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. Perhaps I'm not alone in the realization that some 55 years later, we are still choosing convenience over conscience. Convenience is defined as the state of being able to proceed with something with little effort or difficulty, a thing that contributes to an easy and effortless way of life. Its synonyms include expedience, advantage. I have no doubt that in the wake of Virginia, it was politically expedient, convenient to swiftly renounce the namesake of Lee Elementary. Finally, after nearly 100 years, it was considered offensive enough to be removed. Likewise, I have no doubt that it is politically, perhaps financially expedient and convenient to rename Lee Elementary Lee Elementary. Today, I must lament, just as King did, for it is an historical fact that privileged groups seldom give up their privileges voluntarily. Individuals may see the moral light and voluntarily give up an unjust posture. But as Reinhold Niebuhr has reminded us, groups tend to be more immoral than individuals. I was not going to wade into this matter until I spoke with my little cousin Tremont. He's a 5th grade student at Lee. He spent this time in a program he genuinely loves. I called him yesterday and asked him if he knew who his school was named after and how he felt about it. I want to let him share his thoughts.
I just think that we need to at least change the name so people won't think that we're a racism school and that we're not a racism school, but I don't want people to think that we're a racism school and not have their kids to go there and get disrespected or anything. And we all need to just come together and work as a team to fix this problem.
Proud of you, man. It's a difficult conversation, and I respect everyone's perspective in it. I know that there may not even be, as I was advised by a board member, as many voices coming out to remove the Lee name as to keep it. But I would leave you with these words from Dr. King. A genuine leader is not a searcher of consensus, but a molder of consensus. Use your power and do the right thing, not the convenient one. Thank you.
Ms. Taylor Painter-Wolf.
Hello. My name is Taylor Painter-Wolf. and I am a Tulsa native, a Booker T. Washington graduate, an active member of the Tulsa community, and a teacher at Lee. So first of all, let me say thank you for your support of teachers and the upcoming potential shutdown. Call your legislators. I do have a strong opinion on this issue, and I should probably say I am only speaking for myself. I'm a teacher at Lee, but I am speaking on behalf of myself, no one else, and I think I would have this opinion no matter what. I have the good fortune of being a teacher at Lee, which is a wonderful place to teach and a wonderful place to go to school. And that gives me a little bit more insight into, this process and this issue. But I've been supportive of a name change since this conversation started, and I've been happy with this process as it's gone thus far, and the time it's taken for consideration and research. But I have to say I'm very disappointed in how the renaming process has gone at this point. It's gone very fast. It has not been very transparent as far as I'm concerned, and I really feel like it should involve a more diverse group of voices and a wider variety of opinions. And I feel like keeping the name Lee really amounts to no change at all. And it feels, I know that people are very connected to the school, and I feel connected to the school as well. I know people are connected to the history of the school, but it feels really meaningless to me to change it like this, and it's not a change. So that's where I stand on this issue. But I know you all have already heard from people saying their opinions on the name Robert E. Lee and things like that. So I thought maybe speaking to the process of the renaming might be useful. And I have a problem, and like Ms. Dodson stated, with the amount of communication that's gone on here and the amount of time this has taken. We got a letter from Dr. Gist on March 2nd that said, in the event that the board decides to make changes to any school name, the process set forth for this in-board policy includes involvement at the school level from school administrators, teachers, parents, alumni, students at minimum. And I understand and I appreciate that the policies have been followed, and the committee was formed as it was supposed to be. But I'm reading that in the event that the board decides to make changes, and I'm thinking they're going to vote, and then there's going to be a process. But as it turns out, the process is basically already over before the vote has even been cast to rescind or not. So I know a lot of people thought that they would be able to give some input here, and they haven't been able to. So Mr. Percival read the letter for the nomination last Monday on March 5th, and then this most recent Monday, the committee met and approved that nomination. So in a week's time, this nomination has been approved, and there was no time to make other nominations, to add input. There was no request for input from the school community, from the Tulsa community, and I just don't think that it should go like that. I think that it should be more inclusive of the whole Tulsa community, a diverse variety of people. It should represent the diversity of this city. Tulsa's becoming very progressive. I think that the name should be representative of that, and I think this process should be representative of that. And at this point, it's not. So I would like to see a whole new name, but at the very least, I would like to see this process slowed down and take more voices into consideration.
Mr. Matthew Bristow.
So first, thanks to everyone on the board for your service and advocacy for our students, for our district. I'm a parent at Lee also. I've got a third grader, a first grader. Been at the school for 4 years, and I'll be there, I think, till 2026 by the time my youngest one graduates. As everyone's spoken, there's a community of stakeholders at the school like I've personally never witnessed anywhere else. Diversity exists in our school. Ethnic, social, religious, racial, economic. I understand that I'm probably the least example of diversity as a human, but if you walk through the halls, you see it every day within our school. But at the same time, with all of that, I've never been in a body of people who were so unified in a common cause to lift up the very least within our school community. And I think there's a danger that when we have this discussion, that can get lost. The lifelong friendships that are being formed within our community because of the way that we work together in this common cause only comes from shared experiences in something that you're all fighting for. And I think a big part of the tension that exists is because people are so have been so engaged in this school. You know, I think of a parent's natural instinct to care first for the needs of their own child before the needs of anyone else. That just doesn't happen in our school, and I think it's truly remarkable. You've got countless volunteer hours from people engaged in our school. You've got parents teachers, other kids who look to find the least privileged person and find ways to do the most for that person. I learned that through being a parent at Lee, what that meant. Diversity and inclusion is intentional within our school, but it's not something that's described as intentional. It's not something that's named diversity and inclusion. It's the way the school is. I think of you know, examples, kids who don't have, parents who can't afford clothes. A parent sets up a program to recycle lightly used, clean clothes for any student within the school. The work that's done to raise money for the benefit of every child in the school, but also not just to attend meetings, PTA, the board, but to actually be engaged. So with this said, where does it leave us with the name? People talk about this being a rushed process, whereas I feel it's 7 months this process has been going on. 29 weeks we've endured within this school a consistent chatter about a distraction of, are we going to change the name, are we going to rescind the name or not? And 29 weeks is a long time. The voices in this room are all representative of our school, but there's a quiet, overwhelming majority that want to keep the name Lee. But to never lose sight of why Robert E. had to go. We want to discuss the inequality that exists in our school and in the broader community, and we want our children to know that the history of this city is one that is a great learning lesson, because 100 years ago we had one of the greatest tragedies that there was, and our kids are learning about that right now. And I want my kids to continue learning about that. And I think dropping Robert E. and having a consistent pledge within the school to make sure that that we continue the lessons within our school to engage discussion around racial inequality is essential. Timing and process has been another significant discussion point. From anyone who's been working tirelessly within the school for the benefit of our children, this has been an exhaustive process already. 29 weeks, it's a long time. And you think of engagement. Gary Percival, our board rep, is at our school every single week for 30 minutes at drop-off every week. You don't have to talk to the school. You can walk up to him at crossing guard. Everyone knows he's our board rep. He's available to us every week. It's just, you've got this engaged community that wants to move forward. We want to be able to focus our attention back on the significant needs of our kids, the significant needs of our student body, and we're still in this holding pattern where we're not able to escape this issue and actually move forward. And it blows my mind when I hear that this is a rushed process. So I appreciate everything you're doing. I'd like you to so we'd like to count on your vote today and move forward.
Thank you. Mr. Chris Bernard.
Good evening. First, I'd like to thank all of you for your service. I very much appreciate the work you do and the work of all the staff at this district. In my professional life, I work with them. You're all very dedicated to our kids, so thank you. I'm here tonight to speak as a Lee alum and also as a Lee parent. My child is in pre-K there. And speak, you've heard a lot of opinions about the name, and my personal opinion about the name is I would like to see it changed across the board. But I'm also a lawyer and a person who works in policy, so I tend to focus on logic and process. And I heard people say, we feel like we've been in this for 29 weeks. That 29-week process was to decide whether or not to change the name. The process that then goes forward is what to change the name to. There are opportunities to submit names to the superintendent along with evidence, which I think most people of reasonable mind thought would happen after we knew if the name would actually change. Mr. Percival submitted his February 2nd before there was any recommendation there. In addition, you have your own policy. In fact, I think the agenda item says pursuant to policy 8012. So I'd like to talk about what 8012 says and how I would argue this has not actually been pursuant to that. So, first, policy 8012 says the committee, the ad hoc committee to be formed, will review nomination requests and seek community input prior to a recommendation to the Board of Education. I understand the position that Mr. Percival is at our school monthly as a crossing guard. He's at one corner. He's at a corner that only half the school goes to, and not everyone knows he is there. We have a lot of parents who drop their kids off by car, particularly working parents and low-income parents. It is not a formal process, nor had the ad hoc committee been formed. The ad hoc committee was formed at your last board meeting, and they met Monday. I can tell you as a parent, there was no survey that went out. There was no attempt to contact any parents. Mr. Percival and I had a great conversation. I appreciate you listening to me, Gary. We had a nice coffee, and I think I let you know this would be my position. It completely did not follow the policy. The second, it states that the ad hoc committee will be comprised of members representing the diversity of the community. We've heard a lot of people in favor on both sides of keeping the name Lee but dropping the Robert E, and the other side who say we're proud of the diversity of our school, and I agree with that. The diversity of our school is 42% minority. It is 30% low income. I don't know, but I'm willing to venture a guess that the ad hoc committee did not represent that diversity. If it did, I'm open to that, but we would have to know the members. In this case, where we are pushing what is the easy, the convenient solution, which we've done at Lee for years. When I was a student at Lee, we were the rebels. We had Confederate flags all over our hallways. We celebrated Robert E. Lee's birthday with cakes that often had Confederate flags on them. We sang a song in his honor, and slowly we have chipped away at that as the community in power at Lee heard enough of a rumble from the community that it was not okay, but only incrementally and only enough to where they still felt comfortable. This is that same process. I'm very proud that I teach my child that change is hard. Anything worth doing is hard. I have been a change maker in my career for 10 years. It is hard. It makes people uncomfortable, and the majority is often the one that's resistant because the majority is the one that's usually happy with the status quo. In order to avoid fracturing our community further, I would argue at Lee, you need an open process where everyone feels their voice is heard, whether they cross at 19th and Cincinnati or not. Thank you.
Mr. Nathaniel Morris.
Good evening. It's great to be here with y'all. I appreciate that we are having this conversation. I am an employee of the district. I am speaking tonight just as a community member. I am from the state of Virginia. I remember growing up, we would regularly go and visit friends and family in the town of Charlottesville. It was a place that always felt safe and comfortable and beautiful, and I remember when that changed back in August. I remember watching as a city that I loved fell victim to what is a terrorist attack perpetuated by white supremacists in the response to removing a statue of Robert E. Lee from Lee Park. And in that moment, we saw racism in its most vicious form. But what we often miss is that racism is far more insidious than the images that flash across our screen this summer. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, at the start of the school year, there were 200 schools across the country named after Confederate and Klan leaders. The SPLC's report chronicles the timeline of these schools' naming and finds that there are two distinct time periods where these schools were named. The first was during the rise of the Black Codes and the Jim Crow laws and the Tulsa Race Massacre, and the second was immediately following the Supreme Court's decision of Brown v. Board. So these schools were purposefully named after oppressors, and they were specifically named to continue the oppression of people of color. Racism in this country is like a cancer. It's interwoven into the fabric of this nation, and like any cancer, it cannot be eradicated by only removing a small piece of it. It must be cut out in its entirety. Our city failed to do this years ago when it simply renamed the Brady District after a different Brady. And I believe that we as a district will fail to do this if we keep the surname of a school named after Robert E. Lee, a man who, and I'm quoting his words right now, wrote, "The blacks are immeasurably better off here than in Africa. Morally, socially, and physically, the painful discipline they are undergoing is necessary for their instruction as a race, and I hope will prepare and lead them to better things. How long their subjugation may be necessary, is known and ordered by wise and merciful providence." Those were the words of Robert E. Lee. These are not the words of a man of integrity or honor, and I believe we would all agree that these are not the words of a man who deserves to have any remnant of his name remaining on one of our schools. Our kids deserve better than the experience of walking into a building named after an oppressor. It's an experience that many of us are privileged to never have the experience of knowing because of the color of our skin. It's an experience that doesn't just last a few short months, it lasts a lifetime. I'm very grateful that we are having this conversation. I'm grateful that we are finally beginning, for many of us, to be honest about the brutal and terrible history of our city. And I'm grateful for the way that the community at Lee and the faculty at Lee is deeply wrestling with this painful reality with themselves and with their kids. But as we've heard several times tonight, a school is not its name. It is the people and the community and the joy that lives within its walls. So in this moment, if we wish to say that we're a district fighting for equity for all of our kids, we have to truly ask ourselves if we can live out that vision while some of our students still walk into the school in the shadow of white supremacy. Our kids deserve better, and we must deliver it for them. Thank you.
Mr. Scott Pitcock.
Good evening, and thank you for your attention. I appreciate the work that the board does. I am a Lee parent. My 3 children go to school there. I grew up in Tulsa. I graduated from Edison High School. When my wife and I, both from Tulsa, moved back here and decided to have kids, we very much wanted to send them to a public school. I'm from a family of teachers. My mother, my sister, my grandmother, my wife's mother. I could go on and on. I believe in public education. I believe in the mission and the purpose of public education. I believe the good that it does society. But I think, as board member Decker said earlier tonight, this is ultimately about our children and the message that we send to them. Dr. Gist has said several times in the past, we need to live our core values. There's something going on in this country regarding hate and intolerance and prejudice based on race. We know it's going on, and we also know it's worse than it used to be. That's true in Tulsa. That's true all over the country. We know this started with Virginia last summer and neo-Nazis marching in the streets and a Robert E. Lee statue. We have a wonderful school here that has a name that belongs to the past. I believe in my heart that Lee is a wonderful place. My kids wouldn't be there if I didn't love it. The teachers, the staff, goodness knows the many parent volunteers who've appeared tonight and have been mentioned tonight, they're fantastic. And there's obviously some disagreement. That's why we're here as well, that disagreement. But Lee's name needs to go for the message that we want to send our children ultimately. And frankly, as has been mentioned by several, there needs to be a transparent process here. There needs to be basically a series of conversations like the ones we're having now, or at least presentations. There needs to be a democracy or some sort of democratic process. It's messy, but it needs to happen. The decision made by an ad hoc committee, the decision made by a chosen few, does not represent Lee. You've heard about the diversity. You've heard about the numbers tonight. But Lee needs to come together and discuss this. There needs to be a debate, a series of discussions in the evening and in the morning so that everyone can make it. All the parents who have different schedules can be there. There needs to be a discussion about what we want to call this school that will send the right message to our children. And that can't happen if the board votes to rename Robert E. Lee, Lee. If tomorrow, for some weird reason, we all started calling Patrick Henry Elementary on 41st Street Henry Elementary, we would all know the school we were talking about. We would all know the school that's being referred to and the name that's being referred to there. We would know who's being referred to there. It's not good enough to just go with Lee. If you had a school that was going to pick like new school colors or a mascot, that decision wouldn't just be made by the student council, it would be made by the entire school. This is a name we're talking about, far more important, I think. I hope you'll consider that there needs to be a transparent process. There needs to be a series of discussions. That hasn't happened to the satisfaction of so many who are at Lee. And therefore, I hope you'll vote not to change the name of Robert E. Lee to Lee Elementary. Thank you.
Ms. Tasha Kaysen.
Hi, my name is Tasha Kaysen. I have 2 children at Lee, and I am highly not prepared for this at all. In my heart and in my soul, my being, I'm overly prepared. And I have friends who said they can't stand up here because I'll cry, and they have, and I probably will. When we walked into Lee for the first time, my husband was the first to point out that there was a picture of Robert E. Lee with Confederate flags all over, and he was appalled. He was just flabbergasted. He's an amazing historian. He knows far more than I ever will, and I look up to him for that because history is our teacher, and hopefully we can learn from it. And so he gave me something. He gave me a present, and it was to open my eyes and open my children's eyes to the fact that we're honoring people that should never be honored, and I want to be proud. I don't find that celebrating the birthday of a man who has been distinguished as something great to many and then not to others, or just at all, that my kids are eating birthday cake going, I don't know who this person is, but I got cake. You know, they take it so literally, and they don't really know the emphasis of what is happening, you know, and so it is
it's my job, it's everybody's job here to allow them to have a voice. And the fact that there were children here tonight speaking their voice, and the fact that we're taking their voice from them by being the adults and thinking we know what it means to them, is a disservice. It's a travesty that they don't think that they have their own. And that's what's happening right now across the board with the shootings and everything else, that people are saying they're just children and they don't know what they're talking about. They do. They hear us. They hear us muttering under our breaths. They hear us talking to our fellow peers, and they know what's happening, and they don't know what to do with it. There is an unease I can feel within these children, that they don't know what to do with it, and they don't know where to put it. And so maybe they act out at home or at school or wherever. And I want them to have a voice. And so a name is really important. When I meet people, I'm Miss Kaysen. I'm not Tasha Jean Kaysen, I'm Miss Kaysen. And so, you know, that last name it's huge, and that's where I came from. That's my heritage. And, you know, I haven't done, you know, the send-off of DNA or whatever. I don't know. I don't know where my ancestors were necessarily, and they could have been horrible people. But I'm here to make that change for them. And I also want to say that I'm incredibly impressed with everybody that's here and is speaking their voice. But the first person to really open my eyes to it, because the picture was there, the Confederate flags there, this, that, and the other, and I didn't do anything about it. I didn't say anything about it. I just kind of said, well, that's a shame. Hopefully it changes. But did I do anything? No. But Autumn Wharton, who has a daughter in my daughter's class, she came to me and she said, please help me allow people to see what needs to be done because of being of mixed race or of race or ethnicity of any sort. I will never, ever know the strife and the pain and the hurt that lives on within that. And I remember as a young woman or child, and I fell in love, you know, with everybody that gave a difference of a change to my world, and I was told to stop. You know, my mom in particular, she was a person that was like worried what would happen if I had a voice or felt differently, and I didn't understand that. I didn't understand. All I knew is I had pure, immense love for all. But I don't have that for discrimination, and that's really where it comes from.
Thank you, Ms. Kaysen.
Thank you.
Lindsay Barber.
I also am a Lee parent of 2 kids at Lee, and this community here really is special. I think a lot of us have now spoken about that. I'm so grateful for the leadership of Dr. Gist and the board to initiate this process. Last week at the board meeting, a synopsis of the history of public education in North Tulsa was read, and that's just a small piece of what people of color have gone through here in the Tulsa community. And hearing that just brought a lot of perspective. We know that the names were purposely chosen across the United States to send a message. It was made clear who was welcome and who was not. But what does that have to do with us today? If you walked into Lee Elementary today during drop-off or pickup, you would see a diverse community of parents interacting in deep relationship with one another. Last Friday night, you would have observed many Lee moms crafting Mod Podge art projects for the upcoming trivia night, even though it was supposed to be our kids making the artwork. My oldest transferred to Lee in first grade from a suburban school close by, which was known for good quality education, but it felt like a assembly line to me of pushing kids through. And I walked into Lee, and that was completely different. Miss Hoy was my son's first grade teacher, who's since retired, and she was like watching a master at work. She taught through play, and our kids learned to read by acting out plays and reading their lines and dressing up for the part. The Lee Outdoor Classroom provides learning opportunities that develop critical thinking skills and help them apply their knowledge to real problems. Many of the great opportunities available at Lee came as a result of the committed parents that are here today. They pulled their resources, and they went to foundations, and they went to other Lee alumni and asked for money, and that's how they were able to create the Lee Outdoor Classroom. And I'm so appreciative of this, because the results of this resulted in a good quality education for people of all color and socioeconomic background. But I realized recently that not everyone who attends Lee has the same utopian experiences that I have. There are countless reasons for this, and it can vary greatly from family to family. There's an article called The Racial School Climate Gap Within School Disparities in Students' Experiences of Safety, Support, and Connectedness. Black and Hispanic students report less favorable experiences of safety, connectedness, relationships with adults, and opportunities for participation compared to white students within the same school. Their findings suggest that the better the educational opportunities and financial resources, the stronger this gap seems to widen. So I set out to discuss this with other parents of color, particularly when this name change conversation came about, because I had to be honest with myself that I really didn't know how they felt about this issue. I found out that really the name change issue was not the primary concern for them, because a lot of them were very preoccupied with their children's education first and foremost. But they did not necessarily feel as included in the environment at Lee as I would have liked to believe. Yet many of the parents I spoke with did not want to speak publicly about the name change or other diversity issues. What I've heard from them is that they chose Lee School knowing its name, but they decided that it was the right school to give their children the education that they needed. One parent said to me, "I pushed my concerns aside, knowing that dealing with prejudice and other racial bias is inevitable for my kids' future. So why not experience it in a controlled environment such as a school?" This greatly saddened me, and I know it would sadden all the other parents that are here in attendance as well. This is no one's fault in particular. Much of it is a result of systems of racial injustice. Lee School, along with our community, needs to face these topics head on if we hope to find solutions and see change in the future. So parents that feel that we should keep Lee School as the name, they associate the culture with the name, and I understand it. I really do. I get warm fuzzies when I think of Lee. But as I've delved into this, I've realized that my experience may not entirely match those families of color in the school. So that cannot be our sole consideration. Our attachment to the name cannot be the driving force.
Ms. Rachel Humphrey.
All right, good evening all. I am not a Tulsa native, and I did not go to any Tulsa public schools, but I am Rachel Humphrey, and I have had the privilege of serving as a 5th grade reading, writing, and social studies teacher at Lee for the past 5 years. This school year at Lee began with the excitement of greeting a new principal, Miss Flowers, who has taken on an amazing first year as a principal, and meeting our new families and students. At the beginning of the school year, the important conversation surrounding the name Robert E. Lee was also started. Throughout the process, it became apparent that this conversation had been a long time coming. This name is a symbol of hate to some and to others, a historical title of a school with a rich history and community. This conversation is bigger than a name. Our school community and district must focus on equity work beyond just a name change. It is more than just changing a name to create a sense of inclusion, but continuing to foster a sense of belonging, ownership, and unity for all our students and families. I believe all of us need to challenge ourselves as we move forward with that work. Personally, I've been challenged this year as I build a deeper understanding of equity. I've been a member of a team of lead teachers to work with the National Equity Project, and we've learned how the parent before me spoke, that systems produce what they are designed to produce. And I want to be a part of a system that produces global, empathetic citizens. I'm dedicated to that work in my classroom and believe that is the start to a lasting impact. As a child, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a very accepting environment, being multiracial. This year, and I want that for all of my students, I realized that our classrooms are microcosms of the world at large. They are ecosystems where our students learn to live and learn and work in community with one another. I want to equip each of my students to engage in these difficult conversations and push them to view the world from many perspectives, build empathy and understanding for all of their neighbors. One way we explored perspective was through a novel around the Jamestown colony, and my students started to look at power dynamics and relations between wealthy Englishmen, the peasants, laborers, and the Native Americans in Virginia. Students began to understand that when the textbook said there were bad relations with the natives, that the perspectives from both the English and the natives needed to be represented and voiced. We grappled with the idea of the lens in which we learn history and how our perspectives impact our worldview. I continue to be inspired by their thinking and ability to look at history through multiple entryways. When our student teacher began working in our class, she brought new perspective, and our students began learning about the Harlem Renaissance, race relations in our country during that time, and are now reading Tulsa Burning and continue to broaden their understanding of race relations and conversation around the 1921 race massacre in Tulsa. Our students construct their own thoughts about the events and ask questions that may not have definitive answers. They navigate through different perspectives and they connect that to the interactions they're having with each other. As their teacher, some days I'm nervous about going into these conversations, but I see the empathy that they're building, and I know that it's going to make the future a better place. I didn't know that Tremont would be speaking when I walked in, or until I walked in, and it showed me the importance of the work, the real work that's happening in my classroom. I've been so inspired by all that are speaking out today on this because it shows how we grow from hearing perspective, real perspectives. As I picked up my 2-year-old daughter the other day from daycare, the sign outside the church had the quote, "There's more that connects us than separates us," from King T'Challa. This quote from Black Panther rings true on so many levels. We must continue to remember that we as humans are made for relationship, to be in community, and the empathy that plays an important role. It's through listening to one another and being together that true change happens. I am hopeful that no matter the decision regarding our school name, the respectful dialogue continues and the work to build bridges that's already been started continues to grow. Thank you for your time this evening.
Mr. Dan Sinnett.
Hi there, my name is Dan Sinnett. I have 2 children at Lee right now, and we'll have one next year. We've been involved in the Lee community for 3 years. I've been grateful to be a member of the Lee Foundation board for all 3 of those years, as some of the other people who have spoken tonight have also served with me on the board. Our board in the past has focused on capital campaigns primarily. Outdoor classroom, phase 1 and 2 were real crowning achievements in the last few years. Phase 1 was getting done just as we were starting to pick a school for my oldest child, and certainly served in our choice. I believe some parents feel exhausted by this process because the foundation has been in the process since the beginning. We met with Mr. Gary Percival early on in the year, I believe it was September or October, and have had conversations about it, and the conversations have always been, let's sit tight, let's let TPS do their work, we will be a part of it after the recommendation is made. I have assured other faculty and parents in attendance tonight that that would be the case. I was floored to read the information I read today. I also would like to point out that, sorry, give me 1 second. To speak to how easy it is to talk to our board members, I saw Mr. Gary Percival serving as crossing guard every day. I didn't know he was our board member until he was at that meeting in the fall. That's no fault of Gary's. That's just the reality of bringing your kids into school every day. The PTA and foundation boards have had the privilege of more information than the rest of the community. And frankly, I apologize for that to the community. That was not the intention, that was not the process that I understood was going to happen. I appreciate the previous members bringing the words of revolutionaries such as Alexander Hamilton and Dr. King to the table. I think all that serves a lot. I would like to deal specifically with the process. I believe it was 8102 is the policy. A name shall honor a person, foundation, corporation, organization, or other entity that has made a significant contribution or given outstanding service to the district, the city, the nation, or society. Lee School does not do that without the parenthetical Robert E. B, to recognize the geographic section of the city in which the facility is located. Lee School does not recognize the geographic location. Again, without the parenthetical Robert E. To recognize the academic theme of the school or the function of the facility in the case of non-instructional facilities. Again, Lee School does not fulfill that requirement for a name at this point. We need to do better. We need to push harder. When things get hard, I don't tell my kids to take the easy way out. That's not the way it goes. My kids watch my wife and I struggle all the time, and they're better for it, and we're better for it. Let's struggle in front of our kids. Let's figure it out together. I think our community deserves it, and I think our school deserves it. I ask you to vote no on the action item in front of you. Thank you.
Quick pause. Ms. Allison Rossi.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Allison Rossi, and I am a Lee parent of 2 children. Several years ago, my husband and I made the decision to send our oldest child to Lee. It was clear that it was a school that was committed to creativity and innovative approaches. I saw children developing critical thinking and problem-solving skills, crucial tools for 21st century learners. The only strike against the school? The name, Robert E. Lee Elementary. At the time, I approached the principal about my concerns regarding the school's name and was told that the school district had bigger fish to fry. The school's name continued to unnerve me, but I was assured as I got to know parents and families, teachers, and community members who I perceived as forward-thinking individuals. Imagine my shock then when my kindergartner came home to report that she had sung Happy Birthday to Robert E. Lee and was served cupcakes in his honor provided by the PTA. I now have 2 children at Lee who with me walk by a portrait of Robert E. Lee every morning on our way into school. It's been jarring to realize that some members of the Lee community aren't just content to keep the school's name, but also who are seeking to preserve it. Like many parents, I left work tonight after 5 p.m. I picked up my kids and got home late after a long day, and I rushed to be here. But I'm one of the lucky ones to be able to devote my time to being here tonight. You are hearing my voice because I care deeply about renaming the school. But so many others who can't be here, you're not hearing their voices tonight. They're working right now, maybe multiple jobs to keep their families and their afloat, to provide for their children. They're single parents who have no one to watch their children. They feel defeated because their voices are never heard or are too afraid to speak up lest they fear being marginalized. I beseech you to seek broader parent participation in this process, to identify an unbiased facilitator who can lead a more inclusive discussion about changing the name school. We are never just observers of history. We are participants, both by our action and our inaction. Simply changing Lee to Lee is a missed opportunity to right a historical wrong and to create healing in a city that has been plagued by racial divides and tensions. Please don't fail our children. Please rename our school to reflect our school district's values, not the values of a select few in the Jim Crow era in Tulsa. Thank you for your consideration, time, and effort.
Miss Erica Townsend Bell.
Excuse me. My name is Erica Townsend Bell. I am also a Lee parent, surprise. A running theme we have. And I also will out myself as one of the members of the ad hoc committee. Like most of the Lee community, I heard about this name process in the fall, back in August when the conversation started, and I had strong opinions at that time that it was a very beneficial process and an important one, that we undergo exploration and do the work of thinking about whether to change the name and what kind of change that would, what kind of further change that would bring about, and I maintain that position today. I have heard many indicate that this is, that there are more pressing issues. I think we heard a version of that a minute ago. That it's particularly a waste of time and of resources, and I firmly disagree. TPS has many pressing issues indeed, and concerns about equity and inclusion are central among them because they are central everywhere, and they cannot be simply shunted aside as supposedly unimportant or less important. This is true not because TPS, like most urban public school districts, has a significant minority population and a low-income population, but because if this country, our institutions and public spaces want to move forward in regard to our goals of real equity and inclusion and integration, then this is everyone's work, regardless of what a school population looks like, where minorities are present and where they are not. Personally, my feeling is that names are not that important. I come to that position from a variety of perspectives, both through my work as a political science professor, engaged with questions of race, diversity, and inclusion, and domestically, internationally, and with the recognition that a variety of communities throughout the world have grappled with these very same questions and have come to positions that changing names doesn't necessarily in and of itself do any particular work for us. Right. So I am perfectly happy with the name Lee School as an appropriate, as I think an appropriate compromise, especially with the additional recommendations that were made, which is to remove the statue, all references to Lee, and to think through what replaces what was there. More importantly, I engaged in this process, and I made a very conscious choice to engage in this process to do what I thought was the important work, which was not to worry so much about what the name on the outside of the building says, but to think about how this name discussion would bring about the work of us examining Lee. I think Lee is, as has been indicated, a really wonderful and engaging and a robust community, but one where I think it is most accurate to describe a very passive kind of diversity that is not engaged in any significant way that I've seen thus far, and I think that there is a lot of work that we can do to change that, and where I want to see this conversation go is what work are we going to do? What kind of mechanisms are we going to bring about so that we do begin to move beyond concerns about names on buildings and have people, all of the people in the school, tall and small, feel that they are all equally a part of the Lee community. I lost my place. I was going off on a tangent. Not on a tangent, but with the time that I've left, I will say as an ad hoc committee member and somebody who has been engaged in the process, I would be remiss if I didn't say I will admit to a bit of surprise to the points that I've just made about how little discussion there has been at the district level about what the name change would mean or what happens after there is a recommendation to change the name. It seems to me from the position in which I stand, and it may be one of ignorance, I fully accept that there was not much to follow what happens when we recommend that the name change whatever direction that it might go. As a committee faced with a recommendation, we conformed an ad hoc committee that met the stakeholder requirements, at least one parent, the one student, and one staff, but more importantly reflected a real diversity of opinions and real engagement with this question, where we did not come from the same perspective and we didn't end on the same perspective. In our longer set of comments, we indicate that we came to this position to Lee School not as a point of unanimity, but of consensus across the committee. I will end, if I can, by noting one additional point in terms of the process. There has been this fairly recent indication of a motion to hold and maybe to have some broader community engagement. I was actually a really strong advocate, and part of my deciding to engage in the process was as a strong advocate of some kind of a survey to, and my original thought was parents as part of the committee. I've actually become convinced that if we were going to do any such work, it should be by the students. It should really, the parents' voices are not necessarily the most important ones that need to be in the room. We were discouraged from doing that early to let the process work so that we had an actual recommendation, and then we find ourselves just logistically, and we had a long conversation about this and I see I'm out of time, we had a long conversation about this, if I can just and we have to, as I understand it, have a name.
Ms. Townsend-Bell, thank you.
So I will end by saying that we have challenges in moving forward just processually if we want to.
Mr. Darrell Bright.
Good evening. Out of curiosity, I went to the Lee website, and what greeted me was a portrait of Robert E. Lee. I went through the rest of that website, clicking on various links, and what I've heard tonight were reflected in the school creed, was reflected in the 2017-18 Student and Family Handbook about life skills, caring and show concern for others, about friendship, respect. We have great expectations of ourselves and for each other. Principal Flowers is fostering a meaningful culture of relationships. How in the world do you keep Lee in anything this gentleman, or if you want to call him that, and I say that in quotes and being very facetious, did not stand for any of that? He didn't. Now, if we look at history, starting with the African Holocaust on the passage here, how many thousands were killed? Hundreds of thousands were enslaved, lynched, burnt, families torn apart, ears cut off of those who ran away, lynchings, burnings. This is what this gentleman was fighting for. He didn't have a higher calling. He was fighting for, under the banner of state rights, to keep people enslaved. You cannot have a banner and celebrate with Lee Elementary Light. You cannot be a little pregnant. You can't. You have to get rid of all of it. As we look at this, we also look at how many individuals died under his command of the Civil War. How many of different racial backgrounds, ethnicities were put out, and the carnage of men, women, and children. That's what he led. What, am I missing something? This is not a question of whether or not we have the name of a school. We have a gentleman here who should not, and I'm going to stop calling him that, but again, he has not contributed one iota to the meaningful, moral, ethical development of anyone. In fact, the guy was a traitor. He was a traitor. And when we look at this, no Lee Elementary, you call it Lee right now, you call it Lee School, you call it Lee Elementary. Is that really what we want to continue to call this? You know what, just an example, I'm being facetious. We have Adolf Hitler Elementary School. We're going to start calling it Hitler. Hitler Elementary School. Would that fly in anybody's community? Hey, here we are. Measure this man by that metric. He stands up to it. He has no place in the public square. Only in museums, historical societies. He also should have his place in the history books. Name that school in the public square that stands for what your creeds say, that embody that exemplifies that. Teach your children that, and teach them the history. But how dare you elevate this to the question of just the name of a school? This injustice will not stand. You explain it to your children. I still know it as Robert E. Lee. I will forever. And when you explain it to your children, it will still be Robert E. Lee. Well, Mom, Dad, why do you keep calling it Lee? Listen, the centennial's coming. Make that a new beginning. Name that school after someone who really deserves it. Put it up in the public square. Celebrate that person. Teach your children about the attributes that person has. And say, this is a new beginning for Lee. And I think that would do us well in your community also. And we don't need to have a Lee School or Lee Elementary.
Miss Rachel Scroggs.
Hey, this is going to be super short, and I'm very nervous because I was not going to come up here and say anything, and I don't know how I'm supposed to follow him. He's so good. So this is going to be super, super brief, but I am a teacher at Lee Elementary. I've been working there for 3 years, and I teach 4th grade reading and social studies. And so Valerie talked earlier, and I'm a teacher. She was talking about, we're talking about injustice in my classroom right now. And so Lee Elementary to me has never meant Robert E. Lee for sure. It has always meant Reggio Emilia. It's meant a very kind and welcoming and supportive community full of kids, full of parents. Just an amazing place to be. It's one of the top Tulsa public schools, and I love working there. There's no question about whether or not I love my job. I love that I get to spend 8 hours every day at this wonderful place. This past year, we studied Martin Luther King Day, and we really went into who he was as a person. And it was kind of amazing to see my 9 and 10-year-olds, how much they just
They embodied that frustration and that hurt and that empathy of what it was like to be an African American in the 50s and 60s. And I think sometimes we as adults, we kind of think we like have a handle on things. And we look back and we go, you know what, it was a different time, it was a different perspective. And we go, well, you know what, it was wrong back then, but now we know and we're doing things different now. And it's not, I genuinely don't think you can really understand it until you see it through the eyes of a child, of how truly hurtful that time was. And so then here we go, we fast forward 60 years, and look what happens in Virginia. And I understand that you guys are all adults, so are most of you guys, and so you have adult jobs, and you work with adults. I don't. I'm with about 31 little 9 and 10-year-olds every day. And so I hear their perspective on things most of the time. And so recently, we've been talking about injustices, like I said. And I've been asking them, you know, like, so what injustices do you see every day? And, you know, they're like, oh, women's rights and Donald Trump's wall and things like that. And so we go there and we talk about it. And again, I'm going to go back to the fact that I think sometimes we think when our kid hears about the school shootings, or the fact that Robert E. Lee, that a statue was torn down and white supremacists came and made a bold move, that whenever they hear about that, we give them a perfectly scripted response, and it's taken care of, it's done. And that's not the way that their brains work, it's not the way that they function. They take on that stress, they take it on, and they hurt, and they are confused, and they're struggling, and they're trying to figure it out. It's not that they don't know about it, they just don't have a safe place to talk about it. So I think within the past couple weeks, whenever we've been talking about injustices, it really has been brought to my, really just my face, of how important these conversations are to have. How important it is to have empathy and to not just look at things from your own political viewpoint, but to look at it from the other perspective and just to try to understand where they were coming from. I think, I want to say this correctly, what I tell my kids every time that we have debates in class or discussions is I always say, you know what, the point here is not to change the other person's opinion and show them how you were right and they were wrong. The point is to share your perspective and for everybody else to listen, and to listen to each other and to be respectful. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we definitely need to do here. We need to not just be stuck in our own perspective. We need to go and we need to understand what it's like for a Lee parent, or for an African American parent who is working full-time, or for a Hispanic parent who's working full-time, or for a mom who doesn't have a job and is a stay-at-home mom. We need to look at it from all these perspectives. I'm not even going to go into the fact that this was not a transparent process, and I was very frustrated by that, because I fully support TPS, and it's hard to do when it's not transparent. I think, me personally, I know this is not clear, but at the end of the day, after looking at all those perspectives, I think it absolutely should not be Lee Elementary. I think that totally misses the whole point of this discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Tim Forsamon. I'm sorry, I cannot read your writing.
No problem. It's Tim Forsman, but I have terrible writing, so.
Forsman, thank you.
I'm a Lee parent. I have a first grader at Lee. Love Lee, been there since pre-K. And I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but just sitting here, I couldn't help myself. What the people that are, well, first off, I am in favor of keeping the Lee school name. And sitting here, listening to the people that were against it, it seems to me like they're against it for good reasons, but misplaced reasons. And what I mean by that is the people that were pro-Lee kind of came up and they said nice things like, or wonderful things like 42% of our child population is not Caucasian, ethnic of some sort. 35% is economically disadvantaged, or whatever the correct term is. But then they never kind of made their point, which was they thought just by saying that, and then by talking about how much they love Lee, that everyone would understand what they meant. But what they're trying to say is, I believe, and that's what I'm trying to say anyway, is that Lee is self-selecting in that if you've got a child at Lee, you're not a racist. I mean, my God, half the school is not white. Half the school is poor. If you got a child at Lee, you are a good person with a good heart, wanting to make the world a better place. So nobody at Lee, none of the people that have stood up and that want to keep the school's name, nobody at Lee is a racist. So, people that came up that kind of had some sensationalistic, inflammatory stuff, I don't think they were Lee parents. I think they were largely kind of people with inflammatory agendas. But there is not saying that Lee. Half of our country was in a war, one side against the other. Half was on the south, half was on the north. To equate that to being, well, we ought to call it Hitler school, I mean, that's just embarrassing to say. That's not even close to what half of our country was on the south, half was on the north. It was a crazy time in our history that no one is proud of, either side, I don't think. But instead of equating it with all this inflammatory stuff about Hitler and Jim Crow and the rebel flag, I mean, there's not a single parent at Lee that gives a damn about any of that stuff. I never saw my kid eat a cupcake and clap to Robert E. Lee. I mean, we don't want that. But what we do want, and what is important, is tradition, it can be Lee without being Robert E. Lee. Everybody acts like, oh, it has to be that old tradition. What's beautiful about keeping that name is that it doesn't escape the issue. We're always going to be there with that name to get better and better every year about discussing it. The easy thing to do, one eloquent gentleman talked about how it's always the easy thing to do to keep things the same. No, that's the most impossible thing to do. The ad hoc committee that sat down and for a long period of time discussed, looked at history, those people all agreed to keep it Lee School. Let's not lose sight of that. No, that's not just one. I feel like when people are up here speaking, probably me included, you just get one person's opinion, right? Well, discount that. You should discount my opinion. You should discount every person that had they're 5 minutes behind the mic, and count the ad hoc committee. That's why we have it. We had a committee of very caring, diverse people. They thought long and hard about it, and as a consensus, they said, you know what? Let's keep the Lee School. It's tradition. It's not avoiding our history. We got a 100-year school, the oldest one in the continuously open school in Oklahoma, and we're going to trash that on year 99? I mean, give me a break. The hardest thing to do is to keep Lee School the Lee School, and I'm proud that our ad hoc committee decided to do that. I'm proud to be a part of Lee School. I'm not raising a racist, and no one in that school that I know is raising a racist. And everyone talks about, I think the overwhelming majority is people that want to keep it the Lee School. And is it the easy thing to come up here and say that? Maybe not. Maybe people fear that they're going to look like they're not considerate. But Lee is full of considerate people that want to keep it the Lee School. Listen to the ad hoc committee. Thank you very much.
Mr. Matt McAfee.
Hello. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. Wasn't planning on it, but like the gentleman before me, I was listening to quite a bit, and I thought I would like to say my piece. I'm a teacher, and I'm on spring break, hence my shirt tonight. I didn't plan to speak, but again, I'd like to say this. Lee School is located at 1920 South Cincinnati Avenue. I've had the distinct pleasure of living in that area my entire adult life. So I don't have a kid. I've got 2 dogs, but I walk them by the school all the time, and I have had a great time to get to know the neighborhood in my adult life. That school is here because in 1917, Tulsa passed bonds. The citizens of Tulsa passed bonds, and they built 11 new schools. The only one of those schools that's still in use is Lee Elementary. Now, I don't actually have a dog in this fight. I've listened to everything that somebody has said, but I just want to bring up something else about a name change, and it's going to open up a can of worms, but it's nothing new under the sun. It's been brought up actually most recently in a Tulsa World article, and that's where I'd like to depart my speech and just read for a moment. We had a city councilor that proposed a name change. The name Cincinnati Avenue, named after the city, as far as I know, a great American city, but not much connection to Tulsa that I'm personally aware of. And what he wanted to do was change the name Cincinnati Avenue to Martin Luther King Jr. And he was successful partially. He was able to make a name change until he got to just about where Lee Elementary sits. And so at this point, I just want to read this. A city's a lot smaller than Tulsa have a Martin Luther King Boulevard. It was an embarrassment to me to have the city of our size not have one. Henderson said he first worked on the issue with his predecessor, Joe Williams. When Williams was still in office at the time, Henderson said the idea was to rename all of Cincinnati Avenue after King. The idea wasn't well received by a lot of churches and businesses downtown. I didn't get the feeling that they were so upset about the name, said Henderson, 67. The things that we heard the first time was that it would cost a lot of money to change all the addresses of those buildings downtown. It had a lot of churches on it. It's expensive changing it. You have to change all the literature, you have to change the letterhead, you have to change and you have to get the congregation to buy into it. So the idea died there. It wasn't until about a decade later, in 2011, that Henderson revisited the issue with the full support of his city council colleagues. Only this time, he proposed limiting the portion of Cincinnati Avenue that would be renamed to a stretch that runs from Archer Street to the city limits at 65th Place North. Henderson said that at the time, he did not wish to refight the fight to name all of Cincinnati Avenue when he knew he could count on strong support for changing it in North Tulsa. Henderson noted, however, that support for the idea wasn't universal in that part of town. As long as I've got that, I said, hey, that is a start. If we want to explain it later down the road and somebody has enough push to get that done, then that will be a big tall order, Henderson said. I don't see it happening anytime soon. So I guess that was maybe in 2011, if I remember what I read. It's 2018. We're about to celebrate the centennial of the oldest continuous school in Oklahoma history. And there's a large conversation here about the name of the school. But I think it's important that the address of the school is 1920 South Cincinnati Avenue. We went through a name change fight in this city before. I really don't have much to say about the name of the school, but I feel like the city council of Tulsa could bring this issue back up. Maybe the street that the school lies on could be Martin Luther King Boulevard. I don't know if that's a compromise. I don't know if that's anything that the citizens of that neighborhood are interested in doing, or the churches, or anybody else. But I just wanted to bring it up. Thank you for the time you allowed me to have.
Ms. Kelsey McAfee.
Good evening. My name is Kelsey McAfee, and I am currently taking a pause in my career of education to earn a master's degree. For those of you that have missed other school board meetings, his other school board meeting appearances, my husband is Matt McAfee, who's a regular speaker here, so I'm the lesser known McAfee. I did not attend Lee. I do not have a child at Lee. I do not teach at Lee, and I do not live in Lee's district. However, my husband and my first home together as a married couple was a townhouse across the street. In the mornings, we would often wake up, make our coffee, and take a walk on the trail that runs behind Lee Elementary. As many newlyweds do, my husband and I would dream together of the future. Dream of getting our first dog, dream of buying a home, dream of parenting a child, dream of walking them to school, dream of sending them to Lee. If all goes according to plan, I am a future mother, and I want to tell my future son or daughter that I cared about their education from day one. Someday I will tell them about this meeting, the day I spoke at the meeting, the day I was as brave as their dad. Matt and I have since gotten our first dog, and as he mentioned, we actually got 2. And as we're starting to look for a home to purchase, we always make sure it's in Lee's district. Which brings us to tonight's conversation. As a career English teacher, I prefer to plague my students with questions, to prod them for evidence, to get them thinking before I offer them an answer. Prove it. And tonight, in lieu of an answer, I would like to present the board members as individuals with the following questions. What is important to you? What are your values? Who do you know that embodies those values? And who embodies them best? Do you honor this person? And how? And my final question is unoriginal, but I think it fits with our theme this evening. What's in a name? That which arose by any other name might smell as sweet. If this school should maintain the Lee name, members of the board, I ask you to prove it. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our speakers on that item. Before we consider the motion to table, I do want to make sure that we have the committee's nomination in the record. Is Mr. Percival?
I'm going to read it for the committee, if that's all right.
Thank you.
Okay. In accordance with Tulsa Public Schools Board of Education Policy 8102, an ad hoc committee was convened March 12, 2018 to consider the nomination made by Board Member Percival on February 2, 2018. The aforementioned nomination included the rescission of the name Robert E. Lee Elementary and proposed a new name, Lee School. As per policy 8102, the named ad hoc committee included 10 members comprised of Lee community alumni, parents, staff, student, and teacher, as well as a TPS district delegate, all representing diverse perspectives. Considerate of the year-long district process, as well as the challenge presented to the committee, the group explored principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion as a result of the proposed school name rescission and resulting name change. This is a messy, sometimes divisive, uncomfortable, but nonetheless vital component of continuing to foster a community aligned with the school's guiding principles and values, as well as Tulsa Public Schools' Destination Excellence Strategic Plan. Via consensus, but without complete unanimity, the committee makes the following recommendation. As a reflection of the ongoing change and discussions happening at Lee Elementary around issues of equity, diversity, inclusion, and community engagement, and as a mechanism for continued work that will be accomplished by this community, the committee upholds Board Member Percival's nomination to rescind the name Robert E. Lee Elementary School. Additionally, we have a consensus to rename the school Lee School, as outlined in the nomination. Lee School will represent the school community and does not symbolize a surname of any kind. We see this as an effort to keep a connection to our 100-year history, as well as a reminder of the changes we will continue to work towards for the future. In addition to this nomination, we suggest the following commitments be honored. A, that this renaming be understood as part of an ongoing process in which tangible work around diversity and inclusion continues to occur, and which is supported by all stakeholders in our community. To advance the ongoing intention of equitable learning experiences, the Lee faculty and staff is committed to unwavering engagement of equity and diversity within the classroom community, as well as collaborative efforts within Tulsa Public Schools, such as the Designing Equity work in partnership with the National Equity Project. In regards to our Lee community representation, an example of future efforts will include working towards a PTA leadership that is more reflective of our diverse student body. The centennial celebration next school year will provide opportunities to reimagine a diverse public education experience over the next 100 years for our students and their families, while connecting with those who experienced public education at Lee firsthand during the last 100 years. B, that all references, artifacts, and the like that specifically honor Robert E. Lee be removed and rescinded, and that the school move to a model in which we actively and consistently reflect on the past and assess the present via commitment to teaching history through multiple perspectives at an age-appropriate level. This does not preclude discussion of Robert E. Lee as a person of historical interest in better understanding and contextualizing U.S. history. C, that all remaining funds previously set aside for the physical or structural removal of the Robert E. Lee name be repurposed for work relating to diversity education, equitable teaching practices, and community collaboration. Building on work that began at our school 30 years ago, this is part of the larger, more permanent project of redefining Lee as a model for collaborative and forward-looking school community, rather than a school strongly associated with any particular individual or specific name. We look forward to partnering with other Tulsa Public Schools, as well as schools across the nation, in sharing lessons learned in this timely and important work.
Thank you.
Mr. Wade?
Madam President, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure that I don't misunderstand the recommendation. It sounded like it might contemplate the repurposing of bond funds for professional development, and perhaps I misunderstood part C, but I wanted to make sure that that's not part of the recommendation. Okay.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion to table.
I'll speak to that. We've heard a lot of important feedback tonight. I think the board to consider this as our opportunity to hear as an information item and to then vote on it in the future. Even more importantly, though, I think the ad hoc committee heard a lot of important community feedback from within the Lee community tonight, and so the ad hoc community has the opportunity as well, if you so choose, to reconsider, to submit a different recommendation. I thought we do need to look at whether Lee's school is in compliance with our policy. I thought that was a good point, that since it's not actually named after a person, whether we can choose a name that is not named after a certain individual. So we probably should consider that as well. I had not considered that myself. I did want to note that I've brought up several times that it says the ad hoc community should seek, or ad hoc committee should seek community input. I've been advised that this is how the policy has been carried out in the past. This is exactly what happened this time. In fact, there's been more input in the process in this case than is usually the case. However, I do think that it's a very unique situation. We've talked about the fact that it's been going on for 7 months, but this is the climax of a really important time for our city. We heard throughout that 7 months that process matters. Process matters. Like the opportunity to get together as a community and to discuss these important topics and to better understand each other and empathize with each other is in some ways even more important than results in some cases. And so we've talked about the importance of process. I've heard that a lot tonight, that this was not the process of renaming that they expected. It is technically it's in compliance with the policy, but we can go beyond and do more than what the policy states if we so choose. So we absolutely could consider, the ad hoc committee could consider doing more like a survey to gain more input from the community. That will be up to the committee and board member Percival to decide on that. I do look up to Board Member Percival for all the time that he spends at Lee. He's embedded himself in that community and has been very available to listen to parents on both sides. I also want to empathize with the Lee Leopards. This was not something that you asked to go through this for this entire year, for the principal and the staff and teachers. You know, none of the people who are currently at Lee had any part in naming it Robert E. Lee Elementary, and yet you've carried the burden of being there during this time in history. And so I do want to say that I acknowledge that for some of you this has felt very long and very exhausting. I know some of you have heard a lot of opinions on both sides as an elected official, and all of us as elected officials can empathize with that, how draining that is to try to weigh competing opinions and perspectives. And so I want to say that I recognize that it feels painful to postpone or to drag out the process for some. But I also want to make sure that we finish strong and that we have been very deliberate for 7 months in considering the names of our schools. And I wanted to bring us back to the resolution that we passed as a board on August 21st of last year, launching this process, and highlight just a few things that we stated as a board. That 75% of our students in Tulsa Public Schools are students of color who live and learn in a city, state, and country where they will experience racism, injustice, and systemic inequity on a daily basis. It goes on to say, whereas Tulsa Public Schools is committed to identifying, exploring, and combating the systems and structures that have allowed inequities to thrive. And then later on in our resolution, whereas all children in our district should learn in schools that have names that reflect and promote our values and honor all communities we serve. I just wanted to go back to that and kind of ground us in what this work is all about. This is an important opportunity to finish strong. I understand the desire to stay connected with the history of Lee. There was another official recommendation presented to the board and superintendent before the meeting to consider Centennial Elementary as a way to honor that 100-year history, and also to keep in mind the anniversary of the 1921 race massacre coming up as well, and to consider this a rebirth of this community and Tulsa Public Schools in a way, and moving forward. So that would be something the ad hoc committee could also consider. Others can also submit recommendations if we choose to postpone, submit in writing to the superintendent for consideration. But just want to make sure that we remember that we engaged in this process because we want to make sure that all kids feel welcome and honored in our schools, and that for us as Caucasians, I believe personally that we should defer to our brothers and sisters of color in this one, in this case, as to whether Lee School is an acceptable compromise or whether that still does have too much of a relationship to Robert E. Lee to be honoring to that community. And so I do think it would be worthwhile for us to continue the conversation. It is poor timing in terms of testing and a walkout and spring break. And so I'm not sure what we can do about that. I am sensitive to that. I hope that we as a district will be ready to support Lee however we can if there is going to be further process and consideration. But I thank you for all the work that's been done up to this time. I know that Lee is doing a lot of work to address equity in meaningful ways. It does go beyond a name on a school building. It sounds like an incredible committee or community to be part of, to be at Lee. I think families and students feel welcome there, regardless of what the name is on the building. But for those students of color who are part of our community, that would be an extra effort to show how much we do honor them, to go all the way in this in removing Lee from the building. That's my personal opinion. As I said, I've recommended postponing for further consideration by the board and the ad hoc committee. But I will also, if we choose to vote on it tonight, we'll be voting no out of honor for my brothers and sisters of color in this. Voting no if we do not postpone and we vote on the name change.
Thank you. Coming into this meeting as a person who feels that we have been having this conversation since the beginning of the year, and it was officially started by Mr. Percival, who came in with a very strong feeling about what we needed to do just after Charlottesville. And as a person who believes that Mr. Percival, and can say with complete confidence, there is not one board member up here that is more connected to a school than Mr. Percival is connected to Lee Elementary. And I trust him, and I was a party to the conversations about mainly the concerns around safety that this conversation brought onto the Lee community, and repeated conversations regarding that and the district trying to accommodate that. But I have to say that given the motion to delay in hearing, for me in particular, also an attorney, listening to the piece loud and clear that folks felt like there was going to be a rescission and there was going to be a period in between that and a renaming, and that was not going to happen. I feel like on the district's part, on the board's part, that was a miss. And when we do that, we want to take responsibility for it and give that opportunity. But I do want Mr. Percival to have the opportunity to speak to whether or not he wants to reconvene the committee, given some of the conversation this evening. And I think Dr. Gist also has something to say.
Well, this is, I want to start off by saying I really appreciate everybody who's come forward and contacted me and communicated with me in some way about this over the last several months. And I acknowledge that I haven't been returning emails and some of those things. So some of you, I want to acknowledge I've paid careful attention to what people have been saying. But I've kind of been overwhelmed. There has been a lot of input, feedback that I've received over the last, it's not just the last couple of weeks, but, going back into the fall. And I acknowledge that it's not a perfect survey. It's not a scientific survey. It's just my... felt like I was qualified to have an opinion because I have spent so much time over the last few years connected to Lee as a volunteer and whatnot. I didn't really, at a full appreciation what all the speakers have said tonight, I didn't hear anything new or different that I don't think that our ad hoc committee has been exposed to based on the conversation that occurred at this meeting. It was a lengthy meeting, and I started it, and we did introductions, and I kind of stepped out of the way, and it was a pretty amazing conversation by a lot of folks that are really, really concerned. And so based on a lot of the conversation, I feel confident that not just myself, but the members of the committee have been exposed to a lot of these feelings and arguments that have been made. And quite frankly, it's really hard to argue against anybody in this thing. But after working that through and talking it through, the committee came to a consensus that they felt like this needed to move forward now. And I think with a caveat, because I didn't write the recommendation, it was delivered to me the next day. I'm sorry, I'll speak up. And, there was quite a bit of language in there about intentionality of moving forward and doing some things. And these conversations that I think have been contemplated as healthy conversations going into a decision about changing the name are the conversations that they, at least what I'm hearing from the ad hoc committee representatives, and there were faculty and the principal and staff people on that and a student. They're looking forward to moving forward and expanding on the work that has already started this year, kind of via our equity ambassador program and our equity program that the district's embarked on. So You know, the conversation that I heard at the committee was, and I think that is reflected in the recommendation, it was not about avoiding conversations and having hopefully intelligent discussions at age-appropriate levels all across the board to continue to move this work forward and accelerate it. And so I felt that, and still feel that this is a reasonable path forward at a school that has really struggled all year long to be civil, to keep it in the lanes and out of the ditch. And they've done a really good job. And I have to, you know, my compliments to the staff and faculty at the school, Ms. Flowers, and to parents. Because while this has been, in my estimation, an ongoing and fairly active conversation for months and months, maybe not everybody was plugged into it, but it made an impression on me. And so my position is I didn't know what the committee would recommend when we went into the meeting or even in the middle of the meeting. But at the end of the meeting, I heard what they said, which is they wanted to move forward now. They had constructed the guts of this recommendation on a whiteboard. They were wordsmithing and putting it together, and it was delivered to me the next day. And there was a consensus to move forward. I trust the committee's work. I think the committee was aware of and addressed concerns expressed here to us tonight. So my feeling, with respect to all the folks that want more time, I understand and I empathize with that, but I feel like I want to stick with the committee's recommendation to move forward now. So I guess that's about all I have to say at this point.
Thank you. Ms. Marshall.
Change is hard, but oftentimes change is necessary. In sitting here and listening to those who came forward, and I kind of kept a little score sheet here because I've gotten many emails and calls, and I'm more than convinced that by listening to the community, the Lee community, that there are many that are still at unrest with the recommendation. You know, when a baby wets his diaper, a young, inexperienced mother may just test it, and if it's not too wet, they decide to leave the diaper on, and oftentimes the baby comes up with diaper rash because the diaper should have been changed. And I'm not so sure that we're not at that place. So I would say tonight that this is a situation where we may need to allow the community more time. I'm of the opinion that we need to allow the community more time because, let's face it, people, we got to this point because there was a segment of the population that was excluded from the table, and that's why we're here. And if we make the same mistake, years from now, there will be another generation dealing with the same situation. And if it takes a little more time, because the great part about it is at least we're having the discussion, and it's an honest discussion, and it's a fruitful discussion. I don't think anybody's just going through the motions. I believe the superintendent, her team, the ad hoc committee, board member Percival, all of us want change, and it may take just a little more time. And as for my opinion, I believe that that's what we need to do. Thank you.
Dr. Giz.
Madam President and members of the board and Tulsans, First of all, I want to just apologize. While a few people were speaking, we were having some side conversations, sort of trying to figure out a couple of procedural things. So if that happened while you were speaking, I do want to apologize. And I was listening out of one ear and trying to solve a couple problems with the other, but was not reflective of my appreciation for the folks who were speaking at the time. I came into the meeting tonight, like many of the board members and like many of you, having heard from lots of people on this topic, many diverse views about this topic. And I've personally met with the Lee teachers, with the parent leaders, and with Principal Flowers. And I want to pause actually just for a minute and say thank you, Principal Flowers. This has not been it's not been a typical first-year principalship, to say the least, and being a principal is a very, very difficult position, and you have truly done an amazing job with a very, very challenging set of issues before you, and not just this one, but many, and so we're extraordinarily grateful for you. And those conversations that I've had with folks, they were mostly procedural. We were talking about what was happening with the Community Advisory Council. We were talking about what would happen afterward, what would happen with the ad hoc committee, and so forth. And the process that's laid out in the policy is clear. The ad hoc committee makes a recommendation to the board. And so moving into tonight, I know that members of our team had heard an important message from the ad hoc committee. The ad hoc committee received and had been in communication with members of the Lee community. And I want to just say that the members of the ad hoc committee, with the leadership of Mr. Percival, as well as the parent leaders at the school, have had also a very challenging role, trying to navigate complex situation with lots of different viewpoints, and really everyone wanting the best outcome. And this is a very, very important point that I want to make. Everything I have heard from parents, from teachers, from the ad hoc committee, and from Mr. Percival is both an absolute rejection of Robert E. Lee and what he represents, combined with a deep love for Lee School. And that's really, really important. It's also, I think, a really beautiful point, and I think we should all sit with this for just a moment. The folks who are speaking tonight, whether they agree about what the new name should be or not, there is a shared commitment to diversity, to equality, to justice. There's a shared rejection of the negative history and a shared appreciation for the conflict that what Robert E. Lee represents, the conflict that it has with our values as a district and as a community. The committee members, and you heard this in their recommendation, they want to acknowledge and explicitly reject Robert E. Lee. They also, however, want to appreciate and respect the 100-year history of generations of families who've attended Oklahoma's oldest school. And with all of that as a foundation, what I see then is a shared love of Lee School, a shared dedication first and foremost to the children of Lee School and to the families of Lee School and to what happens and the magic that happens in the classrooms at Lee School, and a shared commitment to justice and equality and a rejection of Robert E. Lee. So that's a really important, strong place to start as a conversation for our community. Going forward, this is hard. It's complex. And I want to also just say that I think that it's important to understand, I believe, that there's a very big difference between a street and a school. So we talk a lot about some of Tulsa's experience with street names, and I think it's important to acknowledge that there's a difference between the name of a street and a school. A school is the name of this is one in which generations of families have spent 6 or 7 years wearing Lee School on their t-shirt, talking about how joyfully they are and how happily they go to PE. And is it silly? Sure, of course it is, but it's a part of the school culture. The Lee Leopards, all of that is a part of the school culture. And it's also important that there's a proud tradition and an excitement about the upcoming centennial. And that's an important thing to consider as well. So there's lots to consider. As we approach this conversation, I also think it's important for us to withhold judgment of one another. I think the most unproductive views we could have are passing judgment on others because of their opinions about this topic, and even worse, to have accusations of intent or worth of someone else's view. That it's really important when things are hard like this for us to keep an open heart and an open mind and listen, especially when someone's views are different from ours. Tonight we've heard a lot of passion, we've heard love, we've heard a disagreement about the name, but most importantly, we've heard a shared commitment to equality, equity, justice, not erasing history, but to acknowledging negative history and putting that forward, to have a full acknowledgement and a rejection of racism and oppression. And so given what we've heard, it's clear that despite the best efforts of some amazing parent leaders, our incredible board member who is deeply, deeply committed to Tulsa, to his district, and to Lee School specifically, and they did a yeoman's job and put a tremendous amount of work into this. But I think it seems clear that there is an opportunity for us to continue to listen and consider, to learn, and to bring additional people into the conversation. And so with that, I would recommend to the board that the decision to rename be postponed.
Further discussion on the matter? Vote on the motion to restate your motion, Ms. Shelton. I didn't know if it was delay or move it to information.
I need a motion to postpone the vote until next time, till the next meeting, April 2nd, I believe, with the additional information that the ad hoc committee could request delaying further if they so choose.
I'll call for the vote. Ms. Shelton.
Aye.
No.
No.
Aye.
Aye.
No.
No.
Motion does not carry. We'll move now to the motion for the renaming of the school. So let's read that one more time. Ms. Marshall, do you have an issue?
Exactly what we were doing.
We were voting on the motion to delay.
To delay.
Yes.
Okay. And I wanted to delay.
I move to reconsider the motion.
I move to reconsider the motion.
Is there a second? Move to on the reconsideration of the motion. Ms. Shelton, call for the vote.
No.
No.
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Aye. That's on the reconsideration. Now we're going to reconsider it. On the motion to delay. Ms. Shelton, I'll call for the vote.
Aye.
No.
The motion to delay.
No.
Aye.
Aye.
What is it we're voting on?
Are you guys sure you want us to do this?
To delay? No.
Ms. Fate votes no, and I vote aye to reconsider. To postpone, excuse me. Motion carries. Motion carries. So it'll appear on information on the board meeting on April 2nd. Move on to F2.
Could I clarify? Did you,
Mr. Percival.
President Schreiber, did you say that it goes on information on April 2nd?
Go on action, I apologize. Or did this just move it to information?
No, I believe it moved it to action on April 2nd.
Okay.
So this item will be on action on April 2nd. We're going to move on.
You read action 1. Please read it from here. The annotated was prepared before we finalized this.
Is that where we are?
When you get to item 1. Yes.
So on item F1, the Board of Education authorizes the superintendent to suspend the operation of schools to accommodate teachers' efforts to fight for professional salaries and improved working conditions. The rationale is that Oklahoma's public education system remains chronically underfunded and our educators are severely underpaid. With the defeat of State Question 779 last year and the recent failure of the Step Up Oklahoma plan, it has been abundantly clear that the time has come to take decisive and drastic action on behalf of our teachers and students to improve the conditions in which they teach and learn. We must be willing to do everything within our power to change conditions for our teachers, students, families, and schools. Living our core value of character means our students and their Living our core value of character means that we make decisions, take action, and approach our work based on what is best for our students and their success. We do the right thing even when it's hard. We face difficulty with courage and have the moral fortitude to act in accordance with the beliefs. It is time to lead with character, and we, this board and the superintendent, are incredibly proud of our educators and humbled to stand beside them at this historic moment in time where we are confident that we can effect this long overdue change. If the superintendent suspends school for this purpose, the district school's calendar will be adjusted with days or hours to the calendar as required by law. The Board of Education will review, as applicable, the suspension of operation of schools at each of the upcoming meetings of the board, including the special meeting of the board on April 10th, 2018, the regular meetings of the board on April 6th, May 7, May 21, June 4, June 8, 2018, and any other regularly scheduled meeting and special meeting scheduled by the board in the future. We have some individuals who have signed up to speak on this matter. We'll start with Mr. Kirk Brewer.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. It's the democratic process in play here, and it takes a long time, right? When I came in, I was clean shaven. So. I am an assistant professor at Tulsa Community College. I've been an educator here in Oklahoma since 1991, and in those 27 years, I have heard countless leaders at multiple levels talk about how important education is for our community and for our dreams and our children and our future. Yet despite talk and hopes and dreams and good intentions, and we all know what road is paved with good intentions, the situation of education in Oklahoma remains dire, and that's why I'm here to speak in support of Oklahoma public school teachers and this particular motion. I'm the president-elect of the Faculty Association at TCC, and I'm here specifically representing my colleagues. And by my colleagues, I mean those with whom I teach at TCC and those who labor as educators in the K-12 public school system of Oklahoma. So we, the faculty of Tulsa Community College, officially support Oklahoma public school teachers and their efforts to secure a living wage for education professionals. We've seen the Oklahoma legislature consistently deny adequate state appropriations to fund common education in our state, and the situation has reached a crisis point. Trained teachers are leaving the state or the profession, and our state leaders seem only to have room to give lip service to solving the problem, and that is causing this exodus. So the teachers have finally had to take the only action that they can. So we applaud these efforts as faculty. Fair compensation for doing the essential work of educating our state's children should not be something that they have to fight for, and yet they do. So we support their decision to hold a general work stoppage beginning on April 2nd, 2018, and continuing until our leaders do the right thing and improve the pay and working conditions of Oklahoma teachers. The future of work in Oklahoma will depend on fielding a well-educated and informed workforce. Businesses considering locating to our state should not find poorly funded schools, low graduation rates, and low levels of college attendance, all of which hamper our state's ability to attract new industry. If our legislators will provide the state's education system with appropriate funding from K-12 through higher education, we can hope to achieve a brighter future for everyone. So we, the TCC faculty, add our voices to those of our public school teacher colleagues, and we call on the legislature to immediately address this inadequate compensation for public school teachers and to support all publicly funded education systems throughout the state. Thank you.
Ms. Stephanie Jones.
Members of the board, Dr. Guest, and TPS community, my name is Stephanie Jones. This is my 4th year as a first grade teacher at Skelly Primary. I'm a proud member of TCTA, and my son is a TPS student at Mayo Elementary. I'm really excited about what's happening here, and I want to applaud our board members and Dr. Guest for their leadership in Oklahoma. It's inspired other districts to stand strong behind a message of solidarity. I applaud your forward thinking, your support, and your bravery. In my 4 years of teaching in Oklahoma, I've attended many rallies at the Capitol. I've talked with legislators many times. I've knocked on doors. I've phone banked. I've helped register voters and have advocated alongside Oklahoma educators to remedy the immoral and unprecedented cuts to education funding. I do this on behalf of my students and my son. I'm currently working to the contract, and I want to share a bit about what that means to me. I have early bus duty, and that means that on Monday morning I walked into a dark building that is usually lit up by classroom lights, as teachers have arrived well before their contract time to prepare for students. At 7:10, the teachers and staff left their cars and met at the flagpole, stood for a moment, and walked in together. Families looked on from their parked cars. We walked in together into the great unknown of what working to the contract is. Working to the contract is really a funny thing. It is a formal protest that hinges on the idea that college professionals will no longer work for free. I want to say that again because it's pretty funny. Working to the contract is a form of protest whose sole premise is based on the idea that college professionals will no longer work for free on their own time, on their personal time, on their vacation time, on their family time, during dinner time and breakfast time, on date night, on birthday celebration nights, on game nights. The part of work to the contract that worries me the most is not having my 55 trays of shelf work refreshed and prepared for my students. With my late day Fridays and Saturdays, there is not enough time. My students' flow of elevated academics is affected, and it is screaming at me like nails on a chalkboard. Other teachers at Skelly Primary have similar concerns. Ms. Wingrove just stressed out about her grades. Last week was the first time this year she put her grades in during contract time. She usually puts them in on her own time. Ms. Maben is stressed out about her laminating, and a first-year teacher just wants to sit in her room after hours with the lights on, because sometimes you just have to sit in the room with the lights on and process everything that happened that day. The difficult aspect of working to the contract is not that we are tasked to do more, it is that we are required to do less of the huge workload hoisted upon us to begin with. Teachers do not need martyrdom or apologies or empty promises. We need to be valued. Just as we teach in our classroom communities, we teach here. Value is reciprocal, value is shown in many ways, and value is earned. Are we valuable, Oklahoma? Yes. We must therefore walk because we value our Oklahoma students, and as their advocates, we must walk where they cannot and lend voices to the most important cause of all, the security of their education. Our students have the right to a free and appropriate public education. Let us walk. Students across our state deserve 5-day school weeks. Let us walk. Our students deserve textbooks published later than 2006. Let us walk. Our students deserve support staff, including TAs and paraprofessionals, who make living wages. Let us walk. Our students deserve equal access to the arts, enrichment, AP courses, and special services and sports. Let us walk. And because our students deserve to be educated by teachers who are not dead last, bottom of the barrel, the lowest in the United States of America, walk with us, and we will walk with you. Thank you.
Ms. Shauna Mott Wright.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I am preaching at any pulpit that will have me, and I'm asking everyone, imagine that you are a senior in high school. You're an 18-year-old, and that means education in your state has been cut consistently since you were 8. Not okay. It's not okay. We talk about textbooks, and earlier Dr. Gist and Patty and I were talking about the picture going around on social media of the old textbooks, and some of my classmates, it's been 20 years since I graduated high school, we were talking about, yeah, we had some textbooks like that, but they weren't quite that bad, and even if they were, we each had our own textbook that we could take home with us. And now teachers are fortunate to get a class set. So at least we had our own. The Oklahoma Education Association, excuse me, the OEA revealed our Together We're Stronger plan, which is a $10,000 pay raise over 3 years for teachers, $5,000 for support, and you need to fund our schools. Last night in the Oklahoma Senate, they played more political games. Shame on them. Shame on them. We've lobbied, we've waited, we've believed them when they've told us they will do the right thing, and the time for negotiating with them has sailed. That ship has sailed and sailed and sailed and sailed. You understand, time is no more. We've drawn the line in the sand because our kids can't wait any longer. I don't care about their party. I don't care about the past. I don't care about the blame game. Just do it. Like Nike. Just do it. It's not a matter of impossible or ridiculous ask. Please, like I tell my high school students, don't even. Like, you're not fooling me. It's not a matter of that. It's a matter of can. Can they? Will they? That's what it is. Will they? They absolutely can. Don't be fooled. They need to muster up some courage, and we need to remember in November. I'm encouraging everyone to do 2 for 2. I want you to make 2 calls and write 2 emails every single day. I want you to legally stalk them. They signed up for it when they ran for election. I'm elected. My members are allowed to legally stalk me because they elected me to represent them. And so I need to do that, or they need to elect someone better who will. It's the same with our legislators. You ran for office, buddy. You got elected. You need to represent. So find out who your legislators are. It's as easy as Googling, find my OK legislator. Google, find my OK legislator, click on the first link, enter your information. It gives you federal, you scroll down, and it gives you your state senator and your state House of Representative. Email each one of them every day, call each one of them every day, because our kids cannot wait anymore. You know, we don't want to walk out. That's not the goal. Teachers don't become teachers to not be in school. Duh. We want to be in school. That's a tactic if we have to use it. We don't want to. They could have prevented this. You know, last regular session, one of them came up to me and said, well, we were here till 1 in the morning. Well, big deal. You're like my high school students. I gave you a month to work on that group project. It's not my fault you waited till the night before. Actually, I take that back and apologize to my students because they knew better, because I'd get them. In 1990, I was 9 years old, and I had the awesome privilege of walking alongside my mother and other educators in Oklahoma for House Bill 1017. And I remember, never again, never again. I am a lot older now, and here we are. Not okay. I want to say thank you to Dr. Gist and the school board. Thank you for having the courage to do what's right and what is needed, most needed for our students. Thank you for standing up. I want to say a huge thank you to the parents and the students in the community and our city as a whole. How you have supported us is so heartening. There will be a last call town hall meeting March 29th at 6 p.m. at Memorial High School, and everyone's invited. There will be a panel of legislators and legislative candidates to hear our voices and to answer our questions. Last call, because Friday the next day, that's the last chance before April 1st when they need to actually follow that law of funding.
Move that concludes our speakers, and I'm going to move to amend item F1. On the recommendation, I would like to move the last paragraph of the recommendation up into of the rationale, if you'll excuse me, up into the recommendation, and if necessary, I can read the motion.
I don't believe it's necessary unless you'd like to.
Okay. We have dueling lawyers.
She's agreeing.
Oh, she's agreeing? Okay. Okay. So that just moves that last paragraph of the rationale up into that. So can I get a second on the motion to amend? And if there's any discussion on that, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Fate?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion to approve the amended recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call for the, Ms. Shelton.
I just wanted to thank Dr. Gist for deferring to teachers on this and really affirming the leadership of OEA and TCTA, and thank you for your leadership on that. And just a quick question for nonprofits or businesses or anyone who's thinking about kids, if we do have to close school, thinking about kids and meals, who should they reach out to if they want to help with that?
So I happened to attend a meeting yesterday, and several district folks were there, of about 90 agencies at the United Way, who is going to serve as a hub for that. And there's some excellent news around food and for getting kids fed, and just the way that Tulsa is, not surprisingly at all, 100% coming together, supports our teachers, and is prepared for this action should it be necessary. And I don't know if others attended that meeting, or if Dr. Gibbs maybe has some more specific answers, but I'm confident Tulsa's going to put it together for all of the families and the support workers and everyone who will need support during a walkout if it becomes necessary.
More to come, more to come, but lots of organization happening, lots of efforts, and we will be, our community will be well served should we have to close schools.
And if I'm not mistaken, the United Way has put together on their website, there is a link. Ms. Shannon?
I'm sorry, can you repeat
that? The
that?
United Way has a website, don't they, where they're going to have a link to these different kinds of services and what you might be in need of?
Yes, you can go to the United Way's website now, click on a link. It allows you to complete a form if you are an individual or an agency who would like to contribute support. And then the United Way will be working with partners to compile that information. They'll be providing all of the information to 211, as well as pushing it back out through their websites and other partners' websites, so that people have real-time access to safe places for kids, supervision for children, as well as places to access meals.
Thank you. And I'll just add that it's been really amazing to see Tulsa be Tulsa in this process, and to see the way in which people are stepping up. It's truly awesome, and the team at the district is doing an incredible job. The leadership of the Tulsa Classroom Teachers Association. There's no playbook. I keep telling people there's no playbook for closing school in the middle of the year, and so we are just figuring this out. It is coming together. We will stay in close touch via our website, via our social media pages, and over email for our staff. One point I'll make, that because it's on the forefront of everyone's minds, and that is obviously our students and making sure they are safe and cared for and fed during this time, and enriched during this time, but also our support employees. And I'll just pin that to say that it's very much on the forefront of our minds, and we're working really hard on that issue right now. I met with our bus drivers today, so we're working on that too. I know that's something a lot of people share concern about.
With that, I'll call for a vote on the amended. Oh, sorry, Ms. Keller.
It's fine. I was actually going to make this comment in my board reports or comments, but this seems a more fitting and appropriate place. As board members, we're supposed to be very stoic up here, especially during comments, and I kind of lost myself a couple of times during those last speakers, so I apologize for the drop in decorum. And I think it's very appropriate that Shauna Mott-Wright called that her pulpit, because I think that she really preached it tonight. And I would like to just say how very proud I am to be a part of this TPS team, and how well everyone is working together for what is an unbelievably important common cause. And we're all working it's just amazing to me. The movement is incredible, and I'm super excited just to be a part of it. And I want to thank everyone up here and everyone out there for everything that you guys are doing. And I want to echo, call your legislators. Email your legislators. Call somebody else's legislators. Email somebody else's legislators. When yours get tired of hearing from you, hit up somebody else's. So that's all. Thank you, President Schreiber.
With that, I'll call for a motion on the amended recommendation on F1. Sorry, we're way to the vote. Okay. I'll call for the vote. Ms. Shelton.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, we are to item F3. Thank you all. Item F3, recommendation purchase audiology equipment from Phonak for students in the district's deaf education hard of hearing programs. Cost is not to exceed $198,581.99. The new equipment will replace outdated audiology equipment and better meet the needs of students who are deaf or hard of hearing. This item is appearing on the action agenda to allow the district to take advantage of time-sensitive discounts and meet the federal funds requisition cutoff date of March 16th, 2018. I'll entertain a motion to approve item F3.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on this item? Call for the vote. Ms. Vate?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Move to F4, enter into an agreement with ThoughtBot in Boston, Massachusetts for the period of March 16th through February 28th, 2019 for consulting and technical expertise regarding data dashboard development, and the cost is not to exceed $350,000. Fund is from grant funds, and the rationale, I think, was discussed at our last meeting, but this is an effort to continue to improve our dashboard at the request of the users.
Move approval. Second.
Dr. Gist, any additional information regarding this item?
Sure. At our last meeting, board members requested some additional information to have just a better understanding of what kinds of things we might see in the data dashboards and what we're hearing from school leaders and from teachers about what they would love to have available to them. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Fedor and hear a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Dr. Gist, President Schreiber, and members of the board. So first want to send a heartfelt thanks to Miss Brandy Wall, Assistant Principal at Kendall Whittier. The board asked last board meeting to have a little more information and thought it would be great to bring in a teacher or school leader to talk about it. So I called Miss Wall and said, great, it's going to be an action item, it's going to be top of the agenda, you'll be in probably 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And so thank you so much, Miss Wall. You'll hear from her in just a second, but really appreciate you and all principals and assistant principals. So just a quick overview of the dashboard. This shouldn't take more than 30 or 45 minutes of your time today. The dashboards are available to teachers, school leaders, counselors, and librarians. The idea is to be a one-stop shop for data. Any data you need as one of those users, it's there. You don't have to go to multiple systems. Something we've developed internally by the data strategy and analytics team. The agenda item you're looking at today is to get more support from some external individuals, but focused solely on these dashboards. And it's an evolving resource, something that changes quite literally daily. There's different things. Sometimes you don't notice them, but they are different new developments going on. So just a quick view of what it might look like. What you see here is a graph of a student's information around attendance. And in blue, you see the 15-16 school year, in red, the 16-17, and in green, the 17-18. This is an actual student, and this is something, unfortunately, we see with a lot of elementary school students when they get from third grade going into fourth, fifth, sixth, is progressively lower attendance over the year. So you can see right now in the 17-18 school year, lower attendance than prior years, and this student has fallen into the chronically absent category as of January. A big concern, but something that the teacher can see very clearly and easily. So for those teachers still in the room, if you haven't got on the dashboard lately, tulsaschoolsdata.org, please do check it out, see where your students are at. Similarly, with math or reading scores. Here is our MAP scores. We talk about them often, but seeing at an individual level. For this student, I can see their score in red. I see an increase over the past couple of tests. Notice it also goes back to 2015. It's not all about what's happening this year. It's about a student's history, and so we have lots of information from many years in the dashboard. I see an increase, and naively as a teacher, not knowing a lot, I might think this is good. I see the actual raw score increasing. But if I look in blue, the student percentile, meaning how are they doing compared to students across the nation, it's actually decreasing. So they're increasing their overall score, but not keeping up with the increases peers are seeing over the same time. So lots of rich information with that. This same student, while they are at the 15th or so percentile in math, In reading, they're knocking out of the park. The student is 65th, 70th percentile there. So lots of clear information available, something that makes us really excited. If you didn't know, yesterday was Pi Day 3.14, March 14th. I hope everyone celebrated as much as I did. So I wanted to share some numbers with you in celebration of a late Pi Day. So 11,444. That's the number of student letters that were generated just in the past 2 weeks. In the dashboard, you can generate student letters to send home with clear, easy to see and understand. So for the parents in the room, if you haven't got a student letter, feel free to ask the teacher, hey, do you have a student letter from the dashboard? We'll make that 445. 1,980. That's the number of educators who have used the dashboard this year. So it's not 100%, but we're reaching a lot of educators. We really, really love that. 58. That's the number of new feature requests by teachers and school leaders. Things that they want to see that we haven't been able to do yet. That's what we hope to do with this contract for ThoughtBot. And then one amazing school leader to share just a little bit of what she likes about the dashboard. So Brandy Wall from Kendall Whittier. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Board President Schreiber, Dr. Gist, and members of the board. First of all, I did not mind staying because this is extremely important. This dashboard changes everything I do every day and allows me to actually spend time in the classroom with instruction and driving, making data-driven decisions. So I did not mind staying. I would like to first say how honored I am to be here, be asked to speak about the impact of the TPS dashboard has and will have on my work as a campus leader. Our teachers and campus leaders need to base their work on real data, not assumptions, so that they are able to differentiate the learning and supports for our students. Before the TPS data dashboard, campuses had to gather data from multiple sites, convert the data into an editable format so that it could be sorted and analyzed. Just to pull up the discipline data to compare to the counseling referral data to find trends took over 2 hours due to PowerSchool's report formats. We are grateful to the data team for meeting with campus and teachers leaders to build a tool that would help support our students. Last year at the School Leadership Institute, the data team asked us to dream about a tool that would support our work. In the past year, they have started to turn that dream into reality. When we are working with a student or discussing a student with a parent, we no longer have to go to multiple sites to pull attendance, discipline, and testing data. Teachers and campus leaders are able to view in one application general information, attendance, assessment scores, grades, and all types of alerts for each student on the student profile page. In the past, this would have taken 3 different programs to get the same data. This year, campus leaders are able to access teacher profile pages that list the certifications, absences for last and past years, map, tripod scores, and class stats. Before that data dashboard, it would have taken three different programs and at least 2 phone calls to access that information. This information at our fingertips reduces the amount of time it takes to create a master schedule and collect evidence for 2 of our domains in our TLE. The data dashboard is becoming a one-stop shop for teacher and campus leaders. As we move forward, we are still going to dream big. Our dream includes an attendance page that has the same tools that our testing page has. A page that allows us to connect discipline referrals and other referrals such as counseling to see if we have a trend. We'd like to see the dual language CPAA assessment data added to our testing tab, and if we're really reaching for the stars, a customizable school page where all the data could be put together and we as each school could analyze it the way we want to, like a very big pivot table that makes us happy. In TPS, our mission is to inspire and prepare every student to love learning, achieve ambitious goals, and make a positive contribution to our world. The data dashboard is becoming a central work tool as we move forward towards destination excellence and meeting our needs of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. That's all we have. Happy to answer any questions that you may have about the agenda item or the dashboards in general.
No questions from the board, but honestly, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it and hope you enjoyed seeing democracy in action. We're going to move to our information, we have an additional recommendation. No. We need to vote on F4. So I'll call for the vote. Ms. Shelton?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're going to move on to item F5. Acknowledge USDA required changes to the RFP for child nutrition services dated March 5th, 2015, and contract as listed on addendum dated February 16th, 2018, issued by the Oklahoma State Department of Education Child Nutrition. Additionally, include a change to the RFP for child nutrition services dated March 25th, 2014, to include administration of the seamless summer program if needed. As a result, the rationale for this item is as a result of the United States Department of Agriculture Management evaluation conducted in May 2017, changes are required to be made to the child nutrition program request for proposal and contract. I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll call for the vote unless there's any discussion from anyone. Ms. Fate?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That moves to the information agenda, which Dr. Gist will manage.
Thank you, Madam President. Items G1 and 2 will be presented by our Chief Learning and Talent Officer, Devin Fletcher. Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Dr. Gist, Madam President, and members of the board. Item G1 and G2 are recommendations to delete the PC technician position, but create and rename the desktop support engineer with the salary grade of TS9 to TS12. And this position supports work in our information technology department. There are two roles that are here, and the desktop support engineer has a higher level of responsibility and much more technical skills to drive forth work within the information technology team that are advanced skills well above what currently exists on the remainder of the team. And this is connected to item G2, which you'll see a renaming of 7 other positions. And so there's kind of a lead technician and then 7 other lead engineer and 7 other technicians that are going to follow. We've talked about this in our talent committee this past week, and we will also create a project assistant which will support our work in the design lab. The project assistant role is create, and the deletion of a role that existed prior allows for us to have a savings of roughly $9,000 to the district.
Any questions? No questions, Dr. Gist.
So I spoke to item G2. I think you may have, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Thank you so much. Okay, item G3 is a recommendation to adopt the 2018-2019 staffing plan that provides the distribution of staff to each school for instructional, administrative, and support personnel to provide a quality learning experience for each and every student. The staffing allocations for individual sites are based on the guidelines of the plan, enrollment projections, and budget. Our Chief Financial Officer, Norberto Delgadillo, has prepared a presentation for you, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
That one's not it.
Not that one.
So it's not that exciting. But, I could try to talk about it.
Nope.
No. Almost there. It's
We had a lot to talk about tonight.
Yeah.
Do not worry, we will not revisit those other two slide decks. We will postpone those to a future conversation, but the one that our Chief Financial Officer is about to share is an important one. And it sounds like we're going to need to get started just with an introduction while that gets sorted through.
Yeah, so what we can do, well, good evening, right? It's been a fun, exciting night. I'm getting even more excited with technical difficulties, but Dr. Giss and President Schreiber, members of the board. And what I wanted to do is really give a brief overview of some of the highlights regarding the staffing plan. Back in December, Dr. Giss shared a letter with the team as far as the volatility of the education funding and making a commitment to work with the board to keep disruption to the classroom at a minimum. So along with that, there's a commitment to keep the staffing plan the same as this year, to really minimize disruption to the classroom. So in the presentation, at some point we'll eventually share it with the folks, is showing just a few highlights from the staffing plan that maintain the same ratios. So the same classroom staffing ratios that we've had this year, the goal is to maintain those for next year as well. Some of the conversion flexibilities that exist for our principals are going to be maintained. So principals have the opportunity to do trade-offs as far as some of their allocation. So for example, a principal at an elementary school leader may opt to take one of their allocations and say, you know what, I have this extra teacher, or I have an allocation that's a teacher. I can decide to swap that teacher out for maybe 3 TAs. Or I can decide to swap that teacher out for a counselor. So those trade-offs still exist. So they're maintained for next year as well, continuing to give principals the flexibility to kind of be more strategic as far as their planning goes and their master scheduling. So we wanted to make sure we keep all of this intact. There are some minor changes, as was discussed in the Finance Committee, really related more to some of our specialty facilities, particularly Shadow Mountain and some of our other programs at alternative sites. And there are some slight changes to those, particularly related to the population themselves, that we are accommodating. So juvenile detention centers, they're expanding, so they're asking for an allocation. And in addition to that, there's 2 additional programs that are being added to support our youth, and so we're working to provide the proper allocations for those. But that, in a nutshell, was going to be the presentation. It would have been more exciting with some fancy graphs, not as fancy as Chief Theodore's, but nonetheless, we'll make sure to get that presentation to the board members. And in addition to that, our staffing plans also, eventually once it gets approved, is also available online. So for example, folks can take a look at our this year's staffing plan. It's something that's available on our website. So I'll stop, see if there's any questions right now.
Mr. Percival.
A comment, President Schreiber. The Finance Committee reviewed this with Mr. Delgadillo the other day. Ms. Shelton was there and myself.
Dr. Decker is now a member of the...
Not yet. But anyway, I was pleased that we are not having to try to change those class sizes. That was the thing I was really most anxious about, is that we would try to increase that ratio. So I was pleased with all the staff work that went into that, and this, thank you for your report.
Thank you.
I wanted to add something. I think that's a really important point, Mr. Percival, and I want to just, with everything that's going on right now, this is one of those moments that could easily slip by us. You underscored that point. I'm going to underline it one more time. We can't afford to do this. I just want to be clear. We can't afford to hold our class sizes steady. We've made a decision, and I'm so grateful to have a Board of Education who has this commitment to teachers and kids. We've made a decision that we're doing it anyway, because we cannot continue to see cuts to education fall on the shoulders of our teachers. So this is a really important moment, and I'm glad you raised that significance, and I just wanted to underscore it again and share my appreciation to the Board of Education for that commitment.
And if possible, at the next meeting, we can have copies of this report available to the attendees at the meeting and even possibly run through it as we go to the action item.
Yep. So, great.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do you have any staff reports this evening, Dr. Gist?
Well, like I said, we had a staff report, and I had a report as well, but we're going to go ahead and, given that it's almost 10 o'clock, we'll postpone those for a future conversation.
We do have citizen comments tonight, and I'm going to move that up before the board member reports and concerns if there are still the citizens here that want to speak. And the first person this evening is Ms. Zoe Madison. Okay, I don't think Ms. Madison is here anymore, which is entirely understandable. And then we have a second speaker, Ms. Stacy Woolley. Ms. Woolley also did not stay.
We can reach out and invite.
But yeah, we will definitely reach out and invite both of them back. And I want to thank all the earlier speakers this evening for being here. So that with that, we'll move back to the board member reports and concerns. Are there any board member reports and concerns?
I'd just like to thank Dr. Gist and the rest of the people that put together these equity community meetings that we have had this year. I have learned so much. They've been extremely well done, and Hannibal Johnson's done a good job leading them. But thank you on behalf of myself to and able to learn something new.
Thank you.
I'll just say quickly, I was very proud of the TPS community this week to see schools throughout the city support their teachers in the work the contract effort, and saw pictures and my own children and different sites throughout the city just really supporting their teachers and knowing that this is something that they would never do if it were not completely necessary. And it just warms my heart again to know that you know, all of the citizenry is behind our teachers and know how important they are to just the foundation of who we are as Americans. So I want to say again, I'm just so grateful to Tulsa for being a part of that and supporting us in that and their efforts as well. I only will say thank you all for bearing with me tonight. It's been a very long week, and there's a lot of fumbling around on the motions and the back and forth, and I apologize for that, and I appreciate everyone being here and my board, you know, cooperating with me and figuring this all out together. You may or may not know this, but we are elected board members, but we don't get paid for any of this. We serve it's an honor to serve the people, and sometimes it is really a yeoman's task, and we're proud. We're all very, very proud to do it, but we do have some training, but we haven't had any Robert's Rule of Orders ever since I've been on the board, and I think that might be kind of productive. So that's all. Dr. Gist, do you have any remarks?
No, see, I was going to say no and then speak anyway. Yes, I have some very brief remarks, which is that I love this city. You know that, you hear that from me all the time, but today was one of those days that there were multiple reasons why I am just extraordinarily grateful and proud of Tulsa. And it is an honor to work for this Board of Education.
Any new business, Mr. Wade? The next regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Education will be held on Monday, April 2nd, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. in the Cheryl Selman Room at the Education Service Center, 3027 South New Haven Avenue, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
I'll call for the vote. Ms. Shelton?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.